the Silurian Hypothesis, asking if industrial civilizations left traces. In 2018, Gavin Schmidt from NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies and Adam Frank from the University of Rochester published a provocative paper in the International Journal of Astrobiology titled The Silurian Hypothesis. Would it be possible to detect an industrial civilization in the geological record? The paper took its name from Doctor Who, a British science fiction series featuring an ancient reptilian species called Silurians, who supposedly ruled Earth before humans. Schmidt and Frank posed a serious scientific question. If an industrial civilization existed on Earth millions of years before humans, what traces would remain, and could we detect them in the geological record? The authors weren't claiming that ancient civilizations actually existed. Instead, they used the thought experiment to explore what signatures modern human civilization will leave in the geological record millions of years from now. This question has implications for searching for extinct civilizations on other planets. If we can't detect ancient civilizations on Earth, how would we recognize them on Mars or exoplanets? The paper examined what physical, chemical, and isotopic traces persist over geological timescales and which disappear through erosion, subduction, metamorphism, and other processes that reshape Earth's surface. The challenge is immense. Geological time spans millions to billions of years, while human civilization's industrial phase has lasted only about 300 years from the Industrial Revolution, beginning around 1750 to the present. This represents 0.000002% of Earth's 4.54 billion year history. If a civilization existed for even 100,000 years, hundreds of times longer than our industrial era, and went extinct 100 million years ago, finding evidence would be extraordinarily difficult. Most surface features erode away within millions of years. Only specific geochemical signatures might persist in sedimentary rocks that escape metamorphism and subduction. Schmidt and Frank identified several potential markers of industrial civilizations. First, stable isotope anomalies, unusual ratios of carbon-12 to carbon-13 or oxygen-16 to oxygen-18 that might result from burning fossil fuels or manufacturing processes. Second, unusual spikes in elements like lead, mercury, or platinum that concentrate during industrial activities. Third, synthetic molecules like plastics or persistent organic pollutants that don't occur naturally. Fourth, changes in sedimentation rates or erosion patterns from agriculture, deforestation, or construction. Fifth, nuclear signatures from weapons testing or reactor accidents, unusual isotope ratios, or excess radioactivity. The paper noted that modern human activity is already creating a detectable layer in the geological record. Plastic particles, concrete, fly ash from coal burning, radioactive isotopes from nuclear tests, and elevated atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations will all appear as anomalies in rock layers formed today. In 100 million years, geologists, whether human descendants or alien visitors, could identify the Anthropocene, the proposed geological epoch marking human industrial impact on Earth. The question becomes, would we recognize a similar layer from 100 million years ago if it existed? One key finding: direct physical artifacts like buildings, roads, or manufactured objects wouldn't survive. Steel corrodes completely in thousands of years when exposed to water and oxygen. Concrete crumbles through weathering. Even stone monuments erode within millions of years, unless buried in sediments that protect them from weathering. The pyramids of Egypt, only 4,500 years old, already show significant erosion. In 10 million years, they'll be unrecognizable. In 100 million years, nothing will remain except possibly anomalous chemical signatures in sediments where construction materials dissolved and were redeposited. Fossils of the civilization's inhabitants would be the most obvious evidence, but fossilization is rare. Less than 0.01% of organisms that ever lived became fossils. For an organism to fossilize, it must die in conditions that prevent decay, usually burial in sediments without oxygen, and the sediments must remain undisturbed through geological time. If an ancient industrial species had a population of 10 billion individuals existing for 100,000 years, comparable to modern humans, perhaps only a few thousand individuals would fossilize. Finding these rare fossils among countless rock layers spanning billions of years would be incredibly difficult without already knowing where to look. The paper calculated that urban areas where most industrial activity concentrates cover less than 1% of Earth's land surface, which is only 29% of Earth's total surface. So industrial civilization's physical footprint occupies roughly 0.3% of Earth's surface. Ocean floor sediments cover 71%, but oceanic crust is recycled through subduction every 200 million years on average. Any evidence on the ocean floor older than 200 million years has been destroyed by plate tectonics. Continental rocks survive longer. Some are over 4 billion years old, but weathering, erosion, and mountain building continuously reshape the continents, destroying most surface features within millions of years. Schmidt and Frank concluded that detecting an ancient industrial civilization would require finding multiple independent geochemical anomalies in rocks from the same time period across different locations. A single anomaly could result from natural processes, volcanism, asteroid impacts, or ecological changes. Multiple anomalies appearing together globally would be more convincing. They also noted that the absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. Failure to find traces doesn't prove ancient civilizations never existed, only that we haven't found surviving evidence yet or don't know what to look for. The hypothesis remains controversial. Most geologists and paleontologists consider it extremely unlikely that industrial civilizations existed before humans. The fossil record shows evolutionary development from simple, single-celled organisms to complex multicellular life over billions of years, with no evidence of earlier technological species. The scientific consensus holds that Homo sapiens is Earth's first and only industrial civilization. But Schmidt and Frank's paper raised important questions about what evidence survives geological time and whether our methods could detect ancient civilizations if they had existed. The paper's deeper purpose was astrobiological. If we search for life on other planets by looking for biosignatures in their atmospheres or geological records, we need to know what signatures survive. A civilization on a distant exoplanet might have gone extinct 100 million years ago, leaving only faint chemical traces. If we wouldn't recognize those traces on Earth, we might not recognize them elsewhere. Understanding what industrial civilizations leave behind helps refine our search strategies for extinct or extant alien civilizations. The Silurian Hypothesis became a framework for thinking about technological signatures across geological timescales. Popular media often sensationalized the paper, claiming scientists admitted ancient civilizations might have existed. Schmidt clarified repeatedly that the paper was a thought experiment, not a claim of discovery. No credible evidence for pre-human industrial civilizations has been found. The paper simply asked what such evidence would look like and whether we'd recognize it. This distinction matters. Rigorous scientific thinking explores hypothetical scenarios without endorsing them as true. The Silurian Hypothesis is a tool for understanding geological preservation and astrobiological detection, not a proposal that Earth hosted ancient alien or reptilian civilizations. The geological record, spanning 4.5 billion years, Earth formed approximately 4.54 billion years ago from the accretion of dust and gas in the solar nebula surrounding the young Sunday. The age is determined through radiometric dating of meteorites, which formed at the same time as Earth and haven't undergone the geological processing that reset Earth's rocks. The oldest dated meteorites, called carbonaceous chondrites, crystallized 4.567 billion years ago. Earth's age of 4.54 billion years represents the time when the planet differentiated into core, mantle, and crust after the moon-forming impact. A Mars-sized object called Theia collided with proto-Earth about 4.51 billion years ago, ejecting material that coalesced into the moon. The oldest known rocks on Earth are the Acasta gneiss from the Northwest Territories of Canada, dated to 4.03 billion years old. These metamorphic rocks, originally granite that was subjected to intense heat and pressure, represent Earth's earliest surviving continental crust. Slightly younger rocks include the 3.96 billion year old Nouveau-Jitouk greenstone belt in northern Quebec and 3.7 billion year old rocks from southwestern Greenland. These ancient rocks are rare. Most have been destroyed by plate tectonics, weathering, and metamorphism over billions of years. Less than 0.01% of Earth's surface exposes rocks older than 2.5 billion years. The oldest minerals are even older than the oldest rocks. Zircon crystals from the Jack Hills region of Western Australia date to 4.4 billion years ago, making them the oldest known terrestrial materials. These microscopic crystals, typically 100 to 300 micrometers across, survived because zircon is extremely durable, resisting weathering and surviving high temperatures that destroy other minerals. The Jack Hill zircons crystallized from molten rock shortly after Earth's formation, then were incorporated into younger rocks through multiple cycles of erosion, sedimentation, and rock formation. Their survival across 4.4 billion years demonstrates that some materials can persist through immense geological time if protected in sediments. The fossil record begins approximately 3.5 billion years ago, with stromatolites layered structures created by communities of microorganisms, primarily cyanobacteria. The oldest confirmed stromatolites come from the Pilbara region of Western Australia and the Barberton Greenstone Belt in South Africa. These fossils show that life existed by 3.5 billion years ago, and possibly earlier. Some geochemical evidence suggests life arose as early as 3.8 billion years ago. For more than 2 billion years, life remained simple, single-celled organisms without nuclei. Complex multicellular life didn't evolve until much later. The Cambrian explosion, beginning 541 million years ago, marks the sudden appearance of most major animal phyla in the fossil record. Over a period of about 25 million years, geologically brief animals evolved hard shells, complex body plans, eyes, and predator-prey relationships. The causes remain debated: rising oxygen levels, evolution of developmental genes, ecological feedbacks, or some combination. Before the Cambrian, life consisted primarily of simple, soft-bodied organisms that rarely fossilized. The Ediacaran period from 635 to 541 million years ago shows strange, soft-bodied creatures unlike anything alive today, many resembling quilted mattresses or fractal fronds. The Phanerozoic Eon from 541 million years ago to present encompasses the time when complex multicellular life dominated Earth. This eon divides into 3 eras: Paleozoic from 541 to 252 million years ago, featuring the rise of fish, amphibians, reptiles, and early land plants. Mesozoic from 252 to 66 million years ago, the age of dinosaurs. And Cenozoic from 66 million years ago to present the age of mammals. Each era ended with mass extinctions that eliminated large percentages of species and reshaped ecosystems. The Permian-Triassic extinction, 252 million years ago, killed 96% of marine species. The Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction, 66 million years ago, killed the non-avian dinosaurs. The geological timescale divides Earth's history into eons, eras, periods, epochs, and ages, based on significant changes in rock types, fossil content, and global events. The Hadean Eon, from 4.6 to 4 billion years ago, saw Earth's formation and early bombardment by asteroids. The Archean Eon, from 4 to 2.5 billion years ago, witnessed the first continents and photosynthetic life. The Proterozoic Eon, from 2.5 billion to 541 million years ago, featured rising oxygen levels, snowball Earth events, and the emergence of multicellular life. The Phanerozoic Eon spans the last 541 million years. Each division represents major transitions in Earth's physical or biological evolution. Radiometric dating provides absolute ages for rocks. This technique measures radioactive isotope decay. Unstable isotopes transform into stable daughter isotopes at predictable rates, characterized by half-lives. Uranium-238 decays to lead-206 with a half-life of 4.47 billion years, useful for dating old rocks. Potassium-40 decays to argon-40 with half-life 1.25 billion years. Carbon-14 decays to nitrogen-14 with half-life 5,730 years, useful for dating organic materials up to 50,000 years old. By measuring parent-to-daughter ratios in minerals, scientists calculate when minerals crystallized. Multiple isotope systems cross-check each other, ensuring accuracy. Geological time's immensity challenges intuition. If Earth's 4.54 billion year history compressed into 24 hours, modern humans appeared in the last 2 seconds before midnight. Agriculture began 0.3 seconds ago. The Industrial Revolution started 0.002 seconds ago. Written history spans 0.016 seconds. Dinosaurs ruled from 11:41 p.m. to 11:59 p.m. The Cambrian explosion occurred at 9:04 p.m. Life arose around 4 a.m. This scale makes clear how recent human civilization is relative to Earth's history. Any hypothetical ancient industrial civilization would have existed in the vast expanse between 4 a.m. and 11:59 and 58 seconds p.m. more than 99.999% of Earth's timeline. The rock record is incomplete. Vast time periods are missing from any single location. Erosion removes rock layers. Metamorphism transforms rocks, erasing original features. Subduction destroys oceanic crust. Geologists reconstruct Earth's history by correlating rocks from different locations, matching layers by fossil content, radiometric ages, and distinctive markers like volcanic ash deposits. This reconstruction is like assembling a puzzle with 95% of pieces missing. Despite gaps, the overall pattern is clear. Earth formed 4.54 billion years ago, life arose by 3.5 billion years ago, complex life evolved 541 million years ago, and humans appeared 300,000 years ago. Understanding the geological record is essential for evaluating claims about ancient civilizations. Any civilization existing millions of years ago would leave evidence only in rocks that survived to the present. Most rocks, formed more than 100 million years ago, have been destroyed or transformed beyond recognition. Finding evidence requires knowing which rocks are the right age, which environments preserve traces, and what signatures to look for. The geological record's gaps and transformations make detection extremely difficult, but not impossible. Certain chemical and isotopic signatures can persist if incorporated into stable sedimentary rocks that avoid subsequent metamorphism. The geological record also constrains when ancient civilizations could have existed. Before 541 million years ago, no complex multicellular organisms existed, only simple single-celled life and basic multicellular forms. Building an industrial civilization requires complex organisms with sophisticated nervous systems, appendages for tool manipulation, and social structures. These features didn't evolve until the Phanerozoic. Land colonization by vertebrates occurred around 370 million years ago. Intelligent species, primates with large brains, emerged only 60 million years ago. This narrows the window for potential ancient industrial civilizations to roughly the last 400 million years, after complex life diversified but before humans appeared. The Great Unconformity, erasing billions of years. The Great Unconformity is a massive gap in the geological record, where rocks, spanning hundreds of millions to over a billion years, are missing from many locations worldwide. In the Grand Canyon, sedimentary rocks from the Cambrian period, roughly 510 million years old, sit directly on top of Precambrian metamorphic and igneous rocks that are 1.7 billion years old. This means 1.2 billion years of geological history disappeared, eroded away, before the Cambrian rocks were deposited. The Great Unconformity appears on every continent, suggesting a global event removed enormous volumes of rock from Earth's surface between roughly 720 and 550 million years ago. John Wesley Powell first described the Great Unconformity in 1869 during his expedition down the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon. Powell noticed the sharp contact between horizontal Cambrian sandstones and steeply tilted Precambrian rocks beneath. The angular unconformity, where tilted older rocks are overlain by horizontal younger rocks, indicated the older rocks had been deformed, uplifted, eroded flat, and then buried under new sediments. Powell recognized this represented an immense time gap. Later surveys found similar unconformities worldwide, at roughly the same stratigraphic position, suggesting a global erosional event. Multiple hypotheses explain the Great Unconformity. The most prominent is the snowball Earth hypothesis, which proposes that Earth underwent several episodes of global or near-global glaciation between 720 and 635 million years ago. During these events, ice sheets potentially covered most land surfaces down to the equator, with average temperatures around -50 degrees Celsius. The glacial periods lasted millions of years. When glaciers finally melted, triggered by volcanic carbon dioxide accumulation, the rapid transition from frozen to greenhouse conditions caused extreme weathering and erosion, stripping away vast amounts of rock and creating the unconformity. Evidence for snowball Earth includes glacial deposits called diamictites, found in equatorial regions from 720 to 635 million years ago. These deposits contain scratched and polished stones dropped from melting icebergs into marine sediments, indicating glaciers reach sea level even at low latitudes. Cap carbonates layers of limestone deposited immediately after the glacial periods suggest rapid warming and high atmospheric carbon dioxide that precipitated calcium carbonate from seawater. The carbon isotope ratios in these rocks show dramatic shifts consistent with global ice coverage, disrupting the carbon cycle. Alternative explanations for the Great Unconformity include tectonic uplift and erosion during the assembly and breakup of the supercontinent Rodinia. Rodinia formed around 1.1 billion years ago and began breaking apart around 750 million years ago. Continental rifting created mountains that weathered and eroded rapidly, removing older rocks. The rifting process also exposed fresh rock to weathering, accelerating erosion rates. Some geologists argue that tectonic processes, rather than global glaciation, created the Great Unconformity. The two hypotheses aren't mutually exclusive. Both tectonic uplift and glacial erosion likely contributed. A third hypothesis suggests that the Great Unconformity resulted from changes in continental erosion rates driven by the evolution of land plants. Before plants colonized land around 470 million years ago, continents were barren rock with high erosion rates due to lack of soil and vegetation to stabilize surfaces. The transition from barren to vegetated landscapes changed weathering and erosion patterns dramatically. However, this hypothesis struggles to explain why the unconformity occurs before land plants evolved, and why it appears to correlate with the Neoproterozoic glacial periods rather than plant colonization. Some researchers have speculated that the Great Unconformity could hide evidence of an ancient civilization. If an industrial society existed during the missing time period, say 1 billion years ago, all physical traces would have been eroded away along with the surrounding rocks. The unconformity represents the most complete erasure event in Earth's geological record, removing more than 1 billion years of history from many locations. However, this speculation has no supporting evidence. The missing rocks contained no fossils of complex organisms, and chemical signatures in rocks just above and below the unconformity show no anomalies suggesting industrial activity. The Great Unconformity's timing coincides with major evolutionary changes. The Ediacaran period immediately following the glaciations saw the appearance of the first large, complex, multicellular organisms. The Cambrian explosion followed shortly after. Some scientists propose that the environmental upheaval from snowball Earth events, extreme glaciation, followed by rapid warming, created ecological opportunities that accelerated evolution. Widespread erosion deposited nutrients into oceans, potentially fueling biological productivity. Tectonic processes created diverse, shallow marine environments, where evolution experimented with new body plans. Regional variations in the Great Unconformity reveal its complexity. In some locations, the gap spans 1.5 billion years. In others, only 200 million years are missing. Some regions show no unconformity at all. Continuous rock sequences bridge the Precambrian-Cambrian boundary. These variations suggest the erosion wasn't uniformly global, but affected different regions at different times and intensities. Areas undergoing tectonic uplift experienced more erosion. Lowland regions that remained below sea level escaped erosion and preserved continuous sequences. The global pattern emerges from regional events that happen to occur during roughly the same geological time frame. Studying the Great Unconformity provides insights into long-term erosion and preservation. If rocks spanning 1 billion years can be completely removed from the surface, what hope exists for detecting a civilization from 100 million years ago? The answer depends on where the civilization existed and whether evidence was incorporated into stable sedimentary sequences that avoided subsequent erosion. Evidence on continents undergoing active tectonics would likely be destroyed. Evidence in sedimentary basins that remained stable like the deep ocean before subduction or cratonic interiors might survive. The Great Unconformity demonstrates that Earth's surface is dynamic, constantly remaking itself. The unconformity also shows that Earth's rock record is inherently incomplete. We cannot reconstruct Earth's history from a single location because erosion creates gaps. Instead, geologists correlate rocks from multiple locations worldwide, filling in missing periods from one location with rocks from another. This piecemeal approach works for reconstructing geological and biological evolution, but complicates searches for brief events like ancient civilizations. A civilization existing for 100,000 years might have left traces in specific locations, but those locations might have experienced erosion or metamorphism that destroyed the evidence. Finding surviving traces requires identifying regions with continuous, undisturbed sedimentary sequences from the relevant time period. Modern studies of the Great Unconformity use thermochronology techniques, measuring when rocks cooled below specific temperatures to determine when they were at Earth's surface being eroded, apatite fission track dating, and uranium-thorium-helium dating reveal thermal histories. Results show that many regions experienced rapid cooling and erosion between 700 and 500 million years ago, consistent with global erosion event. Combined with evidence from sedimentary rocks deposited after the unconformity, which contain increased volumes of detrital zircons, eroded from continents, these studies confirm that something removed enormous volumes of continental rock during the Neoproterozoic, creating one of Earth's most dramatic geological features, the Oklo natural nuclear reactors from 2 billion years ago. In 1972, French physicist Francis Perrin announced a discovery that challenged conventional understanding of nuclear fission on Earth. Analysis of uranium ore from the Oklo mine in Gabon, Africa, showed depleted concentrations of uranium-235, the fissile isotope used in nuclear reactors and weapons. The uranium-235 to uranium-238 ratio was 0.717%, instead of the normal 0.72% found everywhere else on Earth. This small discrepancy implied that about 200 kilograms of uranium-235 had undergone fission. The only explanation, natural nuclear reactors had operated at Oklo roughly 2 billion years ago, sustaining chain reactions for hundreds of thousands of years without human intervention. The discovery began when routine isotope analysis of Oklo uranium ore at the Pierre Latte enrichment facility in France detected the anomaly. Scientists initially suspected contamination or measurement error, but repeated tests confirmed the depletion. Further investigation revealed that the depletion wasn't uniform. Some samples showed normal ratios, while others were significantly depleted. The pattern suggested localized nuclear reactions had occurred in specific zones within the ore deposit. Field teams traveled to Oklo and found 17 distinct reactor zones where ancient fission had taken place, spread across several kilometers of uranium-rich rock formations. The reactors operated approximately 1.8 billion years ago during the Paleo-Proterozoic era. At that time, uranium-235 was much more abundant than today. Uranium-235 has a half-life of 704 million years shorter than uranium-238's half-life of 4.47 billion years, meaning it decays faster and becomes proportionally rarer over time. 2 billion years ago, natural uranium contained about 3.1% uranium-235, similar to the enrichment level in modern light-water nuclear reactors. Today, after 3 half-lives of decay, natural uranium contains only 0.72% uranium-235. The higher ancient concentration made natural chain reactions possible. Natural reactors require specific conditions to achieve criticality, a self-sustaining chain reaction. First, uranium ore must be concentrated enough that neutrons released by one fission event can reach other uranium atoms and cause additional fissions. At Oklo, uranium oxide concentrations reached 20 to 60% in some layers. Second, a neutron moderator must slow neutrons from high speeds, where they pass through uranium without interacting to thermal speeds, where they're more likely to cause fission. Water served as the moderator at Oklo, filling pores in the ore. Third, neutron poisons elements that absorb neutrons without fissioning must be absent or minimal. The reactors operated intermittently, not continuously. Geological evidence suggests a cycle. Groundwater filled the ore body, moderating neutrons and allowing fission. The heat from fission boiled the water away, shutting down the reaction. As the rock cooled, water returned, restarting the reaction. This on-off cycle repeated for hundreds of thousands of years. The cycle duration was roughly 2.5 hours on, 2.5 hours off, based on xenon isotope ratios that reflect operating conditions. Over the reactor's lifetime, estimated at 150,000 to 500,000 years, it produced about 100 kilowatts of thermal power, on average, comparable to small research reactors. Evidence for ancient fission includes multiple isotopic signatures. The depleted uranium 2:3:5 ratio was the first indicator. Analysis also found fission products isotopes created when uranium splits embedded in the ore. Neodymium isotope ratios showed enrichment in isotopes produced by fission. Ruthenium isotopes similarly showed fission signatures. Xenon gas trapped in minerals contained isotopes in ratios impossible to produce by any natural process except nuclear fission. These fission products remained concentrated in the reactor zones rather than dispersing, indicating the rocks hadn't been significantly disturbed since the reactions ceased. The reactor zones show remarkable retention of radioactive waste. Most fission products remained within meters of where they were created over 2 billion years. This discovery has implications for nuclear waste disposal. If natural processes can retain radioactive materials for geological timescales under the right conditions, engineered repositories might achieve similar containment. The Oklo reactors essentially served as natural experiments testing long-term waste storage. However, conditions at Oklo, including specific clay minerals that trapped radioactive elements, were unusual and might not be replicable at waste disposal sites. Some scientists initially speculated whether the Oklo reactors could have been artificial relics of an ancient technological civilization. This idea quickly collapsed under scrutiny. The reactors operated 1.8 billion years ago, long before multicellular life evolved. The fossil record from that era shows only simple bacteria and archaea. No complex organisms existed that could build reactors. Moreover, the reactor zones show geological features consistent with natural formation, sedimentary layering, mineral zonation, and structural deformation from subsequent geological processes. The isotopic signatures match predictions for natural fission, not engineered reactors. The reactors ceased operating when conditions changed. Over time, tectonic forces fractured the ore body, allowing water to escape rather than accumulating enough to moderate reactions. The uranium-235 concentration decreased through radioactive decay, eventually falling below the threshold needed for criticality. After several 100,000 years, the conditions that allowed chain reactions no longer existed, and the reactors shut down permanently. The ore body remained buried under sediments, preserving the evidence until modern mining operations exposed it. Oklo demonstrates that nature occasionally produces phenomena we associate with advanced technology. Nuclear fission, discovered by humans in 1938, occurred naturally 1.8 billion years before humans existed. This precedent reminds us that unusual geological or geochemical findings don't necessarily imply ancient civilizations. Natural processes, given sufficient time and the right conditions, can produce apparently artificial results. When evaluating claims about ancient civilizations, the Oklo reactors serve as a case study, an extraordinary discovery that initially seemed impossible, but was ultimately explained by natural processes within well-understood physical laws. The discovery of natural nuclear reactors raised fundamental questions about nuclear physics. The fact that criticality occurred naturally and operated stably for hundreds of thousands of years suggests that the fundamental constants of physics, particularly those governing nuclear forces, have remained constant over at least 2 billion years. If the strength of nuclear forces had varied significantly, the reactor conditions needed for criticality would have changed, and the isotopic evidence would look different. The consistency validates physicists' assumption that fundamental constants are truly constant over geological time. No evidence suggests variation in nuclear reaction rates or decay constants. Other potential natural reactor sites exist, but remain unconfirmed. Conditions similar to Oklo high uranium concentration, sufficient water, low neutron poisons must have occurred elsewhere during the Paleo-Proterozoic, when uranium-235 concentrations were high enough. Geological formations in Australia, Canada, and Russia contain uranium deposits from the right time period. However, finding evidence of ancient fission requires detailed isotopic analysis, which hasn't been conducted on most deposits. Oklo remains the only definitively confirmed natural reactor site, but it's likely not unique. The rarity reflects both the specific conditions required and the limited search efforts, rather than Oklo being truly one of a kind. The carbon isotope anomalies in ancient rocks. Carbon isotopes provide powerful tools for detecting past environmental changes and potentially identifying industrial civilizations in the geological record. Carbon exists in two stable isotopes: carbon-12, the most common, and carbon-13, which comprises about 1.1% of natural carbon. The ratio of carbon-13 to carbon-12, expressed as delta-13C, a measure comparing the sample to a standard, varies depending on carbon source and the processes that created it. Biological processes preferentially use carbon-12 because it's lighter, so organic matter has lower delta-13C values than inorganic carbon. By measuring carbon isotope ratios in ancient rocks, scientists can detect changes in biological productivity, carbon cycling, and potentially signatures of industrial activity. The most dramatic carbon isotope anomaly in the recent geological past occurred during the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, or PET, approximately 56 million years ago. During this event, global temperatures increased by 5 to 8 degrees Celsius over a period of several thousand years. Ocean sediments and terrestrial rocks show a sharp negative carbon isotope excursion. Delta-13C values dropped by 3 to 4 parts per thousand across the planet. This shift indicates that a massive amount of carbon with low delta-13C entered the atmosphere and oceans, warming the climate through the greenhouse effect. The PETEM's cause remains debated. The leading hypothesis involves release of methane hydrates from ocean floor sediments. Methane hydrates are ice-like solids containing methane molecules trapped in water ice cages, stable under high pressure and low temperature. They exist in enormous quantities beneath the ocean floor. If ocean temperatures increased slightly, perhaps from volcanic activity or orbital variations, the hydrates could have destabilized, releasing massive amounts of methane. Microbes in the ocean oxidize methane to carbon dioxide, but not instantly. For a period, both methane and carbon dioxide would have warmed the climate. The methane's biological origin explains the negative carbon isotope excursion. Alternative PETM explanations include massive volcanism from the North Atlantic igneous province, which erupted 56 million years ago as the North Atlantic Ocean opened. Volcanic carbon dioxide would have warmed the climate, potentially triggering methane hydrate release in a positive feedback loop. Another hypothesis suggests that burning of organic-rich sediments exposed during sea level drops released carbon with low delta-13C. A more speculative idea proposes that a comet impact vaporized organic-rich marine sediments, rapidly injecting carbon into the atmosphere. Each mechanism predicts different carbon isotope patterns, and researchers continue analyzing rock cores to distinguish between them. Could industrial activity produce a PET-like carbon isotope excursion? Fossil fuel combustion releases carbon with delta-13C around -28 parts per thousand, much lower than atmospheric carbon dioxide at -8 parts per thousand. Burning fossil fuels thus drives delta-13C downward, exactly as observed during the PETM. If an ancient civilization burned fossil fuels on a scale comparable to modern humans, it would create a detectable carbon isotope anomaly in rocks formed during that time. However, the magnitude and rate of change would depend on the civilization's energy use and duration. A brief industrial period might produce only a small anomaly, difficult to distinguish from natural variations. Detecting an ancient industrial civilization through carbon isotopes requires finding anomalies that can't be explained by natural processes. Volcanism, methane release, ecosystem collapse, and weathering changes all affect carbon isotopes. An anomaly must be unusually rapid, faster than typical geological processes, and occur alongside other evidence like elevated concentrations of industrial elements or synthetic molecules. The PETM shows that natural events can produce large, rapid carbon isotope excursions without any industrial activity. This makes carbon isotopes insufficient alone to prove an ancient civilization existed, but they could provide supporting evidence if other indicators were found. Modern human activity is creating a carbon isotope signal that future geologists will detect. Since 1850, atmospheric carbon dioxide has increased from 280 to over 420 parts per million, and Delta 13C has decreased by about 2 parts per thousand due to fossil fuel burning. This anthropogenic signal is now recorded in tree rings, ice cores, ocean sediments, and even cave formations worldwide. If civilization collapsed today, this carbon spike would appear in sedimentary rocks as a thin layer with anomalous isotope ratios. Depending on sedimentation rates, the layer might be only millimeters to centimeters thick, but it would be globally distributed and temporally distinct. The Smithsonian hypothesis, proposed by Gavin Schmidt and Adam Frank, specifically considered carbon isotopes as potential markers of ancient civilizations. They noted that the modern carbon isotope excursion is similar in magnitude to the PETM, but occurring much faster over centuries rather than millennia. This rapid rate might distinguish industrial from natural events. However, in the geological record, distinguishing events lasting 100 years from those lasting 10,000 years is often impossible, because sediments mix through bioturbation burrowing organisms disturb sediments, blurring temporal resolution. Only in exceptional preservation sites like laminated lake sediments or undisturbed ocean floor might century-scale events be resolved. Other isotope systems complement carbon. Nitrogen isotopes track agricultural activity. Synthetic nitrogen fertilizers have distinct isotopic signatures. Sulfur isotopes reflect coal-burning coal, contains sulfur that produces sulfur dioxide pollution with characteristic isotope ratios. Lead isotopes can indicate mining and smelting. Different ore deposits have distinct lead isotope signatures, and industrial emissions spread these signatures globally. Strontium isotopes track continental weathering. Agriculture and deforestation accelerate erosion, changing strontium isotope ratios in ocean water. Together, multiple isotope systems could build a case for ancient industrial activity if anomalies coincided. No confirmed isotope anomalies in the geological record suggest ancient industrial civilizations. The PETM and other hypothermal periods of rapid warming and carbon release are explained by natural processes without invoking technology. The Permian-Triassic extinction 252 million years ago shows massive carbon isotope excursions associated with Siberian traps volcanism. The Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction 66 million years ago shows carbon anomalies from asteroid impact and subsequent ecological collapse. Earlier Precambrian carbon isotope excursions correlate with snowball Earth glaciations, ocean chemistry changes, and the rise of oxygenic photosynthesis. None require industrial civilizations to explain. The challenge in detecting ancient industrial signatures lies in distinguishing them from natural events that produce similar anomalies. Geological processes operate over millions of years, creating enormous diversity in conditions and events. With sufficient time, almost any isotopic signature can be produced naturally. An ancient civilization's markers would need to be not just unusual, but impossible to explain by natural means. This requires multiple independent lines of evidence converging on the same time period. Carbon isotopes alone can't prove an ancient civilization existed, but they could contribute to a broader pattern of anomalies that might warrant deeper investigation. Ultimately, the absence of unexplained carbon isotope anomalies supports the conclusion that no industrial civilizations preceded humans. If such civilizations existed and used fossil fuels or altered ecosystems at scales comparable to modern humans, we should see corresponding carbon isotope signals in rocks. The fact that all known carbon isotope excursions have plausible natural explanations suggests that no such civilizations existed, or if they did, they left no detectable carbon footprint, implying their energy use and environmental impact were minimal. The geological record, when examined through the lens of isotope geochemistry, shows no clear evidence of pre-human industrial activity. The plastic pollution appearing in geological strata. Plastic synthetic polymers derived from petroleum have become ubiquitous in modern society, since mass production began in the 1950 seconds. Annual global plastic production now exceeds 400 million metric tons, and cumulative production since 1950 exceeds 9 billion metric tons. Plastics are durable, resisting degradation by bacteria, fungi, and chemical weathering. This durability makes plastics valuable for manufacturing, but problematic for the environment. Plastic debris accumulates in oceans, rivers, and soil, breaking into smaller fragments, microplastics, and nanoplastics that infiltrate ecosystems worldwide. Plastics are now being incorporated into sediments, creating a distinct geological marker of the Anthropocene. The geological record of plastics begins in the mid-20th century. Ocean floor sediments show sharp increases in plastic particles starting around 1950, coinciding with mass plastic production. Sediment cores from remote locations, including the deep ocean, far from human population centers, contain plastic layers that didn't exist before 1950. Even Arctic ice cores show microplastic particles from the 1960 seconds onward, delivered by atmospheric transport. The distribution is global. Plastics have reached every ocean basin, the deepest trenches, and the highest mountain peaks. This represents one of the fastest and most geographically extensive markers humans have introduced to the geological record. Plastic's persistence depends on their chemical composition and environmental conditions. Polyethylene and polypropylene, the most common plastics, are chemically stable and degrade slowly. Ultraviolet radiation from sunlight breaks down surface layers, creating microplastics, but this process is slow. Mechanical breakdown from wave action or abrasion accelerates fragmentation but doesn't destroy the polymer molecules. Complete breakdown through oxidation takes hundreds to thousands of years for conventional plastics. Biodegradable plastics degrade faster, years to decades, but still persist far longer than natural organic materials, which decompose in months. The question for detecting ancient civilizations becomes, would plastic survive geological timescales of millions of years? The answer is complicated. Plastics buried in sediments, protected from oxygen and sunlight, could persist much longer than surface plastics exposed to weathering. In anoxic environments, ocean sediments, beneath the seabed surface, biodegradation nearly halts. Chemical stability might preserve plastic molecules for tens of thousands of years. However, over millions of years, geological processes would destroy most plastics. Subduction recycles ocean sediments into the mantle, melting everything. On continents, metamorphism at high temperatures breaks down organic molecules, including synthetic polymers. If plastics can't survive millions of years intact, could they leave geochemical signatures? Possibly. As plastics degrade, they release chemical compounds, plasticizers, flame retardants, UV stabilizers that are more resistant to breakdown than the polymer backbone. These additives might persist longer, appearing as anomalous organic compounds in ancient rocks. Additionally, plastic degradation produces carbon dioxide and methane, potentially creating carbon isotope anomalies if plastic degradation was widespread. However, distinguishing plastic-derived carbon from natural organic matter after millions of years seems nearly impossible without molecular-level analysis showing synthetic compounds that don't occur naturally. Microplastics have been found fossilized in recent sedimentary rocks. Researchers discovered plastic particles in rock formations from the early 2000s, demonstrating that sedimentary processes can incorporate plastics into solid rock within decades. The plastic particles fuse with sediment grains during lithification, the process converting loose sediment into solid rock through compaction and cementation. This shows that plastics can become part of the rock record quickly. However, these rocks are essentially modern, only 20 to 30 years old. Whether such features survive subduction, metamorphism, and erosion over millions of years remains unknown. The Anthropocene, the proposed geological epoch marking human impact on Earth, uses plastic as a potential stratigraphic marker. The International Commission on Stratigraphy is evaluating whether to formally recognize the Anthropocene and, if so, how to define its beginning. Candidate markers include the radionuclides from nuclear testing in the 1,950 seconds and 1,960 seconds, the sharp rise in carbon dioxide concentrations, and the appearance of plastics and other synthetic materials in sediments. Plastics provide a clear, globally distributed signal that appears suddenly in the mid-20th century and is easily distinguishable from natural materials, making them strong candidates for defining the Anthropocene's base. Could an ancient civilization's plastics survive? If a hypothetical civilization existed 100 million years ago and used synthetic polymers, almost no trace would remain. Ocean floor sediments from 100 million years ago have been subducted and destroyed. The oldest ocean floor is only 280 million years old in the eastern Mediterranean. Continental sediments might preserve chemical signatures, but 100 million years of diagenesis, chemical changes during sediment burial, would break down complex organic molecules. At temperatures exceeding 100 to 150 degrees Celsius, which occur just a few kilometers below the surface, organic molecules reconfigure into simpler forms. Plastics buried at such depths would transform beyond recognition. Petroleum and coal fossil fuels, formed from ancient organic matter, provide analogues for long-term organic preservation. These materials survive hundreds of millions of years, demonstrating that organic molecules can persist through geological time. However, petroleum and coal are chemically simple compared to synthetic polymers. Petroleum consists of hydrocarbons chains and rings of carbon and hydrogen formed from lipids in ancient organisms. Coal consists of polymerized plant material. Both undergo extensive chemical alteration, losing original structures. If natural organic matter transforms so drastically, synthetic polymers would transform at least as much, likely becoming unrecognizable. The lack of plastic-like materials in the geological record supports the absence of ancient industrial civilizations. If intelligent species existed 50 or 100 million years ago and used plastics at scales comparable to modern humans, some geochemical signature should remain unusual organic compounds, elevated concentrations of specific elements used in plastic production, or isotopic anomalies. Despite extensive geological and geochemical surveys of rocks from all time periods, no such anomalies have been found. This doesn't definitively prove No civilizations existed, perhaps they didn't use plastics or used materials that decomposed completely, but it eliminates one potential line of evidence. Plastics illustrate a broader principle. Detecting ancient industrial civilizations requires finding materials or signatures that survive geological timescales. Direct physical artifacts won't survive more than millions of years. Buildings crumble, metals corrode, ceramics weather. Only materials incorporated into stable rock formations might persist, and even those transform through diagenesis and metamorphism. Detecting an ancient civilization requires identifying geochemical anomalies that can't be explained by natural processes and occur in rocks that haven't been destroyed or metamorphosed. Plastics provide a case study. They're abundant today, but their long-term preservation potential is limited. An ancient civilization's equivalents might similarly have vanished without a trace. The Göbekli Tepe, built 11,600 years ago. Göbekli Tepe, located in southeastern Turkey near the city of Şanlıurfa, is the oldest known monumental architecture in the world. The site consists of massive stone pillars, arranged in circular and oval structures, built approximately 11,600 years ago during the pre-pottery Neolithic A period. This predates agriculture, pottery, writing, and the wheel. The site challenges conventional narratives about civilization's development, which held that complex monumental construction required settled agricultural societies. Göbekli Tepe suggests that hunter-gatherers possess the organizational capacity and motivation to build monuments, potentially inverting the traditional sequence where agriculture preceded monumental architecture. German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt discovered Göbekli Tepe's significance in 1994, though the site was identified in 1963 during a survey by Istanbul University. Initial surveyors dismissed the hill as a Byzantine cemetery because stone fragments littered the surface. Schmidt recognized the stones as Neolithic based on their craftsmanship and immediately began excavations. Over the next 2 decades until his death in 2014, Schmidt directed excavations that revealed the site's extraordinary age and sophistication. Ground-penetrating radar suggests that much of the site remains unexcavated. Perhaps 90% of the structures remain buried beneath the hill. The site features T-shaped limestone pillars, some standing over 16 feet tall and weighing up to 10 tons. The pillars were quarried from limestone bedrock nearby, shaped using flint tools, transported to the site, and erected in circular arrangements. The pillars are decorated with elaborate carvings of animals: lions, foxes, snakes, scorpions, wild boars, vultures, and gazelles, as well as abstract symbols and anthropomorphic features, suggesting the pillars represent stylized humans. The level of artistic skill and effort invested in these carvings indicates that the builders had sophisticated cognitive abilities and symbolic thinking. Göbekli Tepe's purpose remains debated. The lack of domestic structures or evidence of permanent habitation suggests it was a ceremonial or ritual site rather than a settlement. Schmidt proposed it was a temple complex where hunter-gatherer groups congregated for religious ceremonies, feasts, and social interaction. The site may have served as a regional center, drawing people from hundreds of kilometers around. The labor required to build Göbekli Tepe, quarrying, transporting, and erecting massive stones, would have required coordination of dozens or hundreds of people, implying some form of social organization and shared belief system. The site contains multiple circular structures built in phases over approximately 1,500 years. The oldest structures, in Layer 3 dating to 11,600 years ago, are the most sophisticated, larger pillars, more elaborate carvings, better craftsmanship. Later, structures show declining size and quality, suggesting that whatever drove the site's construction diminished over time. Eventually, around 10,000 years ago, the site was deliberately buried. The structures were filled with soil and debris, preserving them for millennia. Why the builders buried Göbekli Tepe remains mysterious. Perhaps beliefs changed, the site lost its significance, or burial was part of a ritual closing. Astronomical alignments at Göbekli Tepe have been proposed but remain controversial. Some researchers claim the pillars align with specific stars or constellations as they appeared 11,600 years ago, suggesting astronomical knowledge. One hypothesis identifies carvings as a record of a comet impact during the Younger Dryas period, a sudden climate cooling event 12,800 years ago. However, these interpretations are speculative. Without written records, determining the builder's intentions is difficult. The carvings might represent totems, myths, or practical knowledge about animal behavior, rather than astronomical observations. Göbekli Tepe's discovery revolutionized understanding of Neolithic societies. Previously, archaeologists believed that agriculture enabled population growth and social complexity, which then allowed construction of monuments like Stonehenge or the Egyptian pyramids. Göbekli Tepe flips this sequence. The site was built by mobile hunter-gatherers before agriculture existed in the region. This suggests that complex social organization and monumental construction can arise without agriculture. Some researchers now propose that monument building motivated agricultural development, feeding construction crews, required reliable food supplies, driving experimentation with plant cultivation that eventually led to farming. The site shows no evidence of being built by a lost advanced civilization, despite some popular claims. The construction techniques, quarrying with flint tools, moving stones with ropes and levers, carving with stone implements, are consistent with Stone Age technology. No evidence exists of metal tools, writing, or advanced engineering beyond what hunter-gatherers could achieve. The sophistication lies in the organization, artistic vision, and cultural complexity, rather than in advanced technology. Göbekli Tepe demonstrates that prehistoric humans were far more capable than previously assumed, but it doesn't require invoking lost civilizations or ancient astronauts. Excavations have revealed evidence of feasting at the site. Animal bones, primarily from gazelles and wild cattle, show signs of butchering and cooking. Stone basins and channels might have been used for brewing beer from wild grains, though this remains speculative. If feasting occurred, Göbekli Tepe might have served as a gathering place where dispersed hunter-gatherer groups came together seasonally to conduct rituals, arrange marriages, trade, and strengthen social bonds. Such gatherings would have required surplus food production, potentially motivating intensified hunting and eventually experimentation with domestication. The site's age is well established through multiple radiocarbon dates. Organic material in mortar between stones and charcoal from hearths consistently date to 11,600 to 10,000 years ago. The stratigraphic sequence, older layers beneath younger layers, is clear. No dates suggest the site is older than 12,000 years or younger than 9,500 years. This places Göbekli Tepe firmly in the pre-pottery Neolithic A period, contemporary with other sites in the region like Jerf El Ahmar and Nevali Chori, though none match Göbekli Tepe's scale or sophistication. Some alternative researchers claim Göbekli Tepe is much older, perhaps 20,000 or even 100,000 years old, and represents a lost, advanced civilization. These claims lack supporting evidence. The radiocarbon dates are consistent across multiple samples and laboratories. The artifact's stone tools, carved pillars are typologically Neolithic, matching tools from contemporary sites. The construction techniques require no technology beyond what Neolithic people possessed. The site fits perfectly within the archaeological context of the region's transition from mobile hunter-gatherers to settled farmers. Claims of greater age ignore the scientific evidence and substitute speculation for data. Göbekli Tepe's importance lies not in proving ancient advanced civilizations, but in expanding our understanding of what prehistoric societies could accomplish. The site demonstrates that monumental architecture, complex symbolism, and organized labor existed before agriculture. This realization forces reconsideration of human social evolution rather than a simple progression from simple to complex. The path was more nuanced, with experimentation, reversals, and varied trajectories. Göbekli Tepe remains under excavation, with much more to discover. Each season reveals new structures and carvings, gradually illuminating the lives and beliefs of people who lived 11,600 years ago and built the world's first monumental site. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis from 12,800 years ago. The Younger Dryas was a period of rapid climate cooling that began approximately 12,800 years ago and lasted roughly 1,200 years. Global temperatures dropped by 7 to 10 degrees Celsius in some regions within decades, an extraordinarily fast climate shift. The cooling interrupted the warming trend following the last ice age, plunging much of the northern hemisphere back into glacial conditions. Ice cores from Greenland show the transition happened within 10 years, possibly as rapidly as 3 years in some regions. The Younger Dryas ended just as abruptly around 11,600 years ago, when temperatures rebounded to near modern levels, again within decades. The impact hypothesis, proposed by Richard Firestone, Alan West, and colleagues in 2007, suggests that one or multiple cosmic impacts, either a comet fragment or asteroid, struck Earth around 12,800 years ago, triggering the Younger Dryas cooling. The impacts would have occurred over North America, exploding in the atmosphere or striking ice sheets. The hypothesis proposes that impacts generated massive wildfires, ejected dust into the atmosphere blocking sunlight, and destabilized ice sheets, disrupting ocean circulation. The resulting climate chaos caused the Younger Dryas cooling and contributed to megafaunal extinctions. Mammoths, mastodons, saber-toothed cats, and giant ground sloths disappeared around this time. Evidence cited for the impact includes a layer of sediment dating to 12,800 years ago, containing unusual materials. Researchers reported finding platinum enrichment. Platinum is more abundant in asteroids than Earth's crust, so elevated levels might indicate extraterrestrial material. They also found nanodiamonds, microscopic diamonds, that can form under high pressure and temperature during impacts. Magnetic spherules, tiny iron-rich spheres, were discovered, which form when molten rock droplets cool during high-energy events, like impacts or lightning strikes. Carbon spherules, resembling those from wildfires, appeared in sediments. Black mass organic rich layers containing charcoal covered many sites across North America. The impact hypothesis remains controversial and disputed by many scientists. Critics point out that the proposed evidence can be explained by terrestrial processes. Platinum enrichment might result from volcanic activity. The Larcher Sea volcano in Germany erupted around 12,900 years ago. Nanodiamonds form in wildfires, lightning strikes, and even inside stars, so their presence doesn't necessarily indicate impact. Magnetic spherules can form from industrial contamination, cosmic dust accumulation over millennia, or natural weathering of magnetic minerals. Black mats and carbon spherules result from wetland fires, which were common during climate shifts. Multiple research teams have failed to replicate the original findings or found the materials in sediments from time periods with no suspected impacts. The Clovis culture, a distinctive archaeological culture characterized by fluted stone projectile points, disappeared around the time of the proposed impact. The culture flourished across North America from about 13,400 to 12,800 years ago, then abruptly ended. The impact hypothesis suggests that impacts devastated Clovis populations, destroyed food resources, and forced cultural reorganization. However, archaeological evidence shows continuity. Post-Clovis cultures developed from Clovis traditions rather than representing completely new population. The Clovis disappearance likely reflects cultural adaptation to changing environments and prey availability rather than catastrophic impact. Megafaunal extinctions provide another line of evidence cited by impact proponents. More than 35 genera of large mammals went extinct in North America at the end of the Pleistocene. Mammoths, mastodons, horses, camels, giant beavers, dire wolves, and American lions all disappeared. The impact hypothesis attributes these extinctions to direct impact effects: wildfires, climate cooling, ecosystem disruption, combined with human hunting pressure on already stressed populations. Critics note that extinctions occurred over thousands of years, not suddenly. Dates for different species extinctions range from 13,000 to 10,000 years ago, inconsistent with a single catastrophic event at 12,800 years ago. Alternative explanations for the Younger Dryas focus on ocean circulation changes. The prevailing hypothesis involves freshwater flooding into the North Atlantic from melting ice sheets. The Laurentide ice sheet covering North America contained vast amounts of freshwater. As it melted, water accumulated in glacial lakes like Lake Agassiz, which covered parts of Manitoba, Ontario, Saskatchewan, and North Dakota. Around 12,900 years ago, this lake drained catastrophically through the Mackenzie River Valley, or St. Lawrence River, releasing enormous volumes of freshwater into the Arctic Ocean or North Atlantic. The freshwater disrupted thermohaline circulation, the global ocean conveyor belt, driven by temperature and salinity differences, shutting down warm water transport to the North Atlantic and causing rapid cooling. Ice core evidence supports ocean circulation disruption. Greenland ice cores show abrupt changes in isotope ratios and dust deposition at the Younger Dryas onset, indicating rapid atmospheric reorganization. Antarctic ice cores show the opposite pattern, warming when the northern hemisphere cooled, consistent with a bipolar seesaw effect where heat accumulates in one hemisphere when the other cools due to altered ocean circulation. This pattern matches predictions for thermohaline disruption, but doesn't match expectations for impact-driven global cooling, which should affect both hemispheres similarly. Graham Hancock's book Magicians of the Gods, published in 2015, popularized the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis among non-specialists. Hancock proposed that a comet destroyed an advanced prehistoric civilization around 12,800 years ago, and survivors passed on knowledge to later cultures, explaining similarities in architecture and myths across ancient civilizations. Hancock suggests that structures like Göbekli Tepe, the pyramids, and Stonehenge preserve astronomical knowledge from this lost civilization. However, Hancock's interpretation goes far beyond what the scientific evidence supports. The impact hypothesis itself remains unproven, and no evidence suggests that an advanced civilization existed 12,800 years ago. Archaeological records show human societies at that time were hunter-gatherers, without agriculture, writing, or complex architecture. Recent studies have challenged the impact hypothesis further. A 2023 analysis of sediments from 28 sites across North America found no consistent evidence for impact markers at the Younger Dryas boundary. Platinum concentrations varied randomly, rather than showing a coherent spike. Nanodiamonds appeared in layers both older and younger than 12,800 years ago, indicating they don't mark a unique event. Magnetic spherules showed no chemical signatures diagnostic of extraterrestrial material. The researchers concluded that the proposed impact markers resulted from natural processes and contamination rather than a cosmic impact. The absence of a crater, or craters, poses a significant problem for the impact hypothesis. A comet or asteroid capable of causing global climate disruption and continent-wide wildfires would create craters unless it exploded in the atmosphere. Air bursts like the 1908 Tunguska event that flattened 2,000 square kilometers of Siberian forest can occur without craters, but they affect limited areas. Causing global effects requires multiple large impacts or a very large air burst over ice, which would leave geochemical signatures in ice cores. No such signatures have been definitively identified. Proponents suggest impacts occurred over the Laurentide ice sheet, but ice cores from Greenland, which would have been downwind, show no clear impact markers. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis illustrates how extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Initial reports of platinum, nanodiamonds, and spherules seemed compelling, but closer scrutiny revealed problems. Independent researchers couldn't replicate findings. Alternative explanations for each marker emerged. The hypothesis highlights the importance of scientific skepticism and reproducibility. While the Younger Dryas climate shift is real and dramatic, attributing it to cosmic impact remains speculative without convincing evidence. Ocean circulation disruption provides a more parsimonious explanation, consistent with ice core data, ocean sediment records, and climate models. The question remains open, but weighted heavily toward natural terrestrial processes rather than extraterrestrial impact. The Piri-Reis map showing Antarctica without ice. The Piri-Reis map, created in 1513 by Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri-Reis, is a fragment of a larger world map drawn on gazelle skin showing parts of Europe, Africa, and South America. The map became controversial in the mid-20th century when some researchers claimed it depicted Antarctica's coastline without ice, supposedly impossible since Antarctica wasn't discovered until 1820 and has been covered by ice for at least 34 million years. If the map truly showed ice-free Antarctica, it would suggest that either the map was based on ancient sources predating the ice sheet, or an advanced civilization mapped Antarctica before modern history, both extraordinary claims requiring extraordinary evidence. Piri-Reis compiled his map from approximately 20 older source maps, including Portuguese charts captured from Spanish sailors, Arab maps, and possibly a map by Christopher Columbus. The admiral wrote notes on the map explaining his sources and methods. The map shows remarkable accuracy for the Atlantic coastlines of Europe, Africa, and South America coastlines well known to European explorers by 1513. The South American coast appears with roughly correct shape and latitude, demonstrating that Piri-Reis had access to recent Portuguese explorations. However, the southern portion of the map has features that some interpret as Antarctica. Charles Hapgood, a historian at Keene State College in New Hampshire, proposed in his 1966 book Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings that the Piri-Reis map showed Antarctica's coastline as it appeared before glaciation. Hapgood argued that the accuracy of coastlines on the map exceeded what 16th century cartographers could achieve, suggesting the map was copied from ancient sources dating back thousands of years when Antarctica was ice-free. He further proposed that an advanced maritime civilization existed in prehistoric times, possessed sophisticated navigation and surveying techniques, and mapped the world before being destroyed by cataclysm, possibly related to Earth's crustal displacement, another of Hapgood's theories. Hapgood's interpretation relies on identifying the map's southern landmass as Antarctica. The map shows South America extending southward and eastward, with a large landmass continuing beyond where the map fragment ends. Hapgood identified this landmass as the Antarctic Peninsula and the Weddell Sea coast. He claimed the map showed features like the Transantarctic Mountains and Queen Maud Land with remarkable accuracy, implying the cartographers had surveyed these regions. Hapgood even enlisted the US Air Force's cartographic section to evaluate the map. Captain Lorenzo Burrows reportedly agreed the map showed Antarctic features, though this claim is disputed and no official Air Force endorsement exists. Professional cartographers and historians have thoroughly debunked Hapgood's interpretation. The most straightforward explanation is that the southern landmass on the Piri Reis map represents the southern portion of South America, possibly with speculative southern lands based on Ptolemaic geography or contemporary beliefs about Terra Australis, a hypothetical southern continent that European cartographers believed must exist to balance the northern continents. Renaissance maps commonly showed exaggerated or speculative southern lands. The Piri Reis map's southern features match South American coastline extensions more closely than Antarctic geography. Detailed comparison of the map's coordinates with actual geography reveals significant distortions. The map uses a projection that increasingly compresses distances from north to south, making southern features appear at incorrect latitudes. South America's southern tip, Cape Horn, at 56 degrees south, latitude appears much farther south on the map, possibly reaching 65 degrees south or beyond. This southward distortion could make South America's coast appear to connect with speculative southern lands, creating the impression of Antarctica. But actual Antarctic features the Antarctic Peninsula, Weddell Sea Coast, or Queen Maud Land don't align with the map's geometry when properly georeferenced. Antarctica's ice sheet is at least 34 million years old, based on geological and paleoclimate evidence. Ice cores drilled in Antarctica date back 800,000 years and show continuous glaciation. Ocean sediment cores containing ice-rafted debris rocks dropped by melting icebergs extend back 34 million years, indicating ice sheets have been carving icebergs into the ocean throughout this period. If Antarctica was ice-free recently enough for humans to map it within the last 10,000 years, there would be no ice sheet today. The amount of energy required to melt Antarctica's ice, which contains 26.5 million cubic kilometers of ice, is enormous. Melting would raise sea levels by 58 meters, flooding coastal regions worldwide. No evidence in sea level records suggests Antarctica was ice-free in human history. The discovery of Antarctica is well documented. Russian explorer Fabian Gottlieb von Bellingshausen, British explorer Edward Bransfield, and American sealer Nathaniel Palmer all sighted Antarctica in 1820, making them the first confirmed to see the continent. Earlier explorers like James Cook circumnavigated Antarctica in the 1,770 seconds without sighting land, but inferred a southern continent from ice conditions. Captain Cook's reports of Antarctic icebergs and pack ice at 71 degrees south latitude made clear that a frozen landmass existed. No credible evidence suggests anyone reached Antarctica before the 19th century. The Piri Reis map's annotations contradict claims of ancient advanced sources. Piri Reis wrote that he compiled the map from about 20 source maps, including maps from the time of Alexander the Great, meaning Hellenistic period maps from 300 BCE, not vastly ancient maps from ice-free Antarctica. He mentioned consulting Portuguese charts from recent expeditions. Nothing in the annotations suggests sources older than 2,300 years, and certainly nothing about Antarctica. The admiral was simply following common cartographic practice, synthesizing the best available information from multiple sources, including speculative geography, where actual knowledge was lacking. Other maps from the 16th century show similar speculative southern lands. The Orontius Phineus map from 1531 shows a large southern continent labelled Terra Australis with rivers and mountains. The Mercator World map from 1569 shows Antarctica as a massive continent. These maps represent cartographic tradition and speculation, not actual knowledge of Antarctic geography. They were based on the Ptolemaic belief in continental symmetry, the idea that land in the southern hemisphere must balance land in the northern hemisphere. The shapes and features depicted don't match actual Antarctic geography when compared carefully. The Piri Reis map is genuinely impressive for its time. It shows the Atlantic with reasonable accuracy, includes features from recent explorations, and demonstrates the admiral's cartographic skill and access to diverse sources. But interpreting it as evidence of ancient advanced civilizations requires ignoring the map's historical context, misidentifying geographical features, and disregarding the actual state of scientific knowledge about Antarctica. The map reflects 16th century knowledge and speculation, not ancient surveying of an ice-free continent. It remains an important historical document, but provides no evidence for lost civilizations or prehistoric Antarctic exploration. The persistence of the Piri Reis Antarctica claim in popular culture demonstrates how compelling narratives can survive despite debunking. Books, documentaries, and internet articles continue repeating Hapgood's interpretation, often without mentioning the scholarly refutations. The story appeals to those seeking evidence of advanced ancient civilizations, but it doesn't withstand critical scrutiny. The Piri Reis map shows what 16th century cartographers knew and imagined, not what prehistoric civilizations supposedly surveyed. It serves as a reminder that extraordinary claims require not just intriguing anomalies, but rigorous evidence that survives expert examination. The Antikythera mechanism from 100 BCS. The Antikythera mechanism is an ancient Greek analog computer discovered in 1,901 inches, a shipwreck off the Greek island of Antikythera. Dating to approximately 100 to 150 BCE, the device consists of at least 30 bronze gears housed in a wooden box about the size of a shoebox. The mechanism predicted astronomical positions and eclipses decades in advance, calculated the dates of ancient Olympic Games, and showed the positions of the Sun, Moon, and planets in the zodiac. It represents the most sophisticated technological artifact known from the ancient world, so complex that nothing comparable appeared in Europe for more than 1,000 years. Yet the mechanism was built using known ancient technology, not by a lost advanced civilization. Sponge divers discovered the Antikythera shipwreck in 1900 while seeking shelter from a storm. The wreck lay at depth of 42 to 50 meters on a steep underwater slope. Divers recovered bronze and marble statues, pottery, glass, jewelry, and coins dating the wreck to approximately 70 to 60 BCE. Among the artifacts was a corroded bronze lump that nobody initially recognized as significant. In May 1902, archaeologist Valerio Stais noticed a gear wheel embedded in the corroded mass. Over subsequent decades, researchers gradually understood that the object was a complex mechanical calculator rather than a simple astrolabe or clock. The mechanism contained sophisticated gear trains with specialized components. The main gear train used a 4:5 ratio to model the Moon's irregular motion. The Moon orbits Earth at varying speeds due to its elliptical orbit, faster when closer and slower when farther. Ancient Greek astronomer Hipparchus had described this variation mathematically, and the mechanism implemented Hipparchus's model mechanically. The device also used a differential gear, a component not known to have existed until the 16th century CE, to add and subtract angular velocities, calculating the difference between the Sun's and Moon's positions to predict eclipses. This represents a level of mechanical sophistication that astonishes historians of technology. Modern analysis using X-ray computed tomography and high-resolution surface scanning revealed the mechanism's inscriptions and hidden components. Researchers led by Mike Edmonds, Tony Freeth, and colleagues at University College London and Cardiff University scanned the fragments in 2005, producing detailed, three-dimensional images of internal gears and over 2,000 characters of text inscribed on the mechanism. The inscriptions included instructions for using the device, descriptions of astronomical phenomena, and calendars. The text confirmed that the mechanism predicted eclipses, tracked the metonic cycle, the 19-year period, after which lunar phases repeat on the same calendar dates, and calculated planetary positions. The mechanism's output was displayed on dials. The front dial showed the zodiac and Egyptian calendar with pointers indicating the sun's and moon's positions. A second pointer showed the phase of the moon. The rear dials were spiral pointer arms, moved along spiral grooves over 4-year and 19-year periods, tracking Olympic Games, eclipse cycles, and other astronomical phenomena. Turning a crank on the side advanced all dials simultaneously through the gear train, allowing the user to set any date and see astronomical configurations for that date. The mechanism essentially computed future celestial positions mechanically, making it the world's first analog computer. The sophistication of the Antikythera mechanism surprised historians, because nothing like it appeared in historical texts. Ancient Greek and Roman literature describes water clocks, sundials, and astronomical instruments like armillary spheres, but never mentions complex geared mechanisms. The mechanism seems anomalous, appearing suddenly in the archaeological record at a high level of complexity, without evidence of developmental history or successors. This has led to speculation that the technology was lost and had to be reinvented centuries later. However, the mechanism's technology, bronze casting, gear cutting, astronomical knowledge all existed in the 2nd century BCE. The mechanism represents expert application of known techniques, not unknown technology. The builder was likely inspired by and possibly connected to the school of thought founded by Hipparchus of Nicaea, the greatest observational astronomer of antiquity. Hipparchus worked around 150 to 125 BCE, developed trigonometry, catalogued over 1,000 stars, discovered the precession of the equinoxes, and developed accurate models of lunar motion. The Antikythera mechanism implements Hipparchus's lunar theory, suggesting either Hipparchus himself or his students were involved in the mechanism's design. The device represents the culmination of Greek astronomical knowledge and mechanical expertise, not an anomaly requiring lost civilizations to explain. Some alternative historians claim the Antikythera mechanism proves ancient advanced civilizations or alien contact because ancient Greeks supposedly couldn't have built such a complex device. This claim ignores historical context. The Greeks had sophisticated knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and mechanics. Archimedes of Syracuse, who lived 287 to 212 BCE, wrote about mechanical devices, including planetaria mechanical models of planetary motion. Cicero, the Roman orator, wrote in 1st century BCE about seeing 2 devices made by Archimedes showing planetary motions. Although Archimedes' devices haven't survived, literary references confirm that mechanical astronomical models existed before the Antikythera mechanism. The gear-cutting technology required for the mechanism was available in ancient times. Bronze gears could be cast using lost wax technique, then filed and finished by hand to ensure accurate tooth profiles. Ancient craftsmen had the patience and skill for such detailed work. Evidence includes the precision of ancient coins, jewelry, and small bronze sculptures. The mechanism's gears show irregularities and imperfections, consistent with hand cutting rather than machine production, confirming ancient manufacture. The sophistication lies in the design and astronomical knowledge, not in manufacturing techniques beyond ancient capability. Why didn't more such devices survive? Several factors contributed to loss. The mechanism was made of bronze, a valuable material that was often melted down and recycled for other purposes. Shipwrecks preserved this one only because it was at the bottom of the sea where salvagers couldn't reach it. Mechanisms that remained on land were likely melted for their metal during periods of economic hardship or war. Additionally, the mechanism may have been rare, perhaps only a few were ever made due to the specialized knowledge and labor required. Astronomical devices mentioned in literature might have been simpler than the Antikythera mechanism, making it an exceptional rather than representative artifact. The mechanism demonstrates that technological sophistication can arise, be lost, and be rediscovered. The gear technology evident in the Antikythera mechanism didn't appear again in Europe until medieval clockmakers began building mechanical clocks in the 13th and 14th centuries. This 1,400-year gap shows that technological knowledge can be fragile, dependent on specific individuals, economic conditions, and cultural priorities. When Rome fell and the Greek world declined, the craftsmen and astronomers who understood such devices disappeared. Their knowledge wasn't written down in enough detail for later generations to reconstruct it, and the physical examples were lost. The Antikythera mechanism is a reminder that ancient peoples were capable of remarkable achievements, and that absence of evidence doesn't prove absence of capability. The Antikythera mechanism is now partially reconstructed and displayed in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. Multiple researchers have built working replicas based on X-ray analysis and surviving fragments. Michael Wright in London and the Antikythera Mechanism Research Project team have created functioning models that demonstrate how the original operated. These replicas confirm that the mechanism worked as proposed, calculating astronomical positions with impressive accuracy. The device represents one of humanity's great intellectual and technical achievements, showing that ancient Greeks possessed knowledge and skills far exceeding what simple stereotypes about the ancient world suggest. The Baghdad battery from 250 BCEs to 640 C. The Baghdad battery, also called the Parthian battery, is the name given to terracotta jars discovered near Baghdad, Iraq, that some researchers claim were ancient electrical batteries. The objects consist of a clay jar roughly 14 centimeters tall, containing a copper cylinder. Inside the copper cylinder is an iron rod separated from the copper by a bitumen seal or asphalt. If the jar was filled with an acidic liquid like vinegar or lemon juice, the combination of copper and iron in electrolyte would produce a small electric current, approximately 1 to 2 volts, making it function as a simple galvanic cell. However, whether these artifacts actually served as batteries remains debated, with most archaeologists favoring alternative explanations. German archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig discovered the first jar in 1936 while directing the Baghdad Antiquity Administration. The jar came from Kujut Rabu near Baghdad, a site with remains from the Parthian period around 250 BCE to 224 CE. Koenig published his theory that the jar was a battery in 1940. He noted that if filled with acidic liquid, the device could generate electricity, and proposed it might have been used for electroplating coating objects with thin layers of gold or silver. Koenig's interpretation gained popularity but remained speculative. The original jars were housed in the Baghdad Museum, where many were looted or destroyed during the 2003 invasion of Iraq. The construction of the jars is simple. The terracotta vessel has a narrow neck and wider base. A copper cylinder, formed from a rolled copper sheet, fits inside the jar. The copper edges were soldered together, indicating metalworking skill, but not necessarily electrical knowledge. An iron rod, often corroded, extends through the center of the copper cylinder. Asphalt or bitumen seals the top, holding components in place and preventing leakage. The entire assembly resembles a modern battery's basic structure, 2 different metals in an electrolyte, but this might be coincidental. Similar configurations could serve other purposes unrelated to electricity. Mythbusters television show tested the battery hypothesis in 2005. They constructed replicas of the Baghdad jars using copper cylinders, iron rods, and terracotta vessels. They filled the jars with various electrolytes, including vinegar, lemon juice, and copper sulfate solution. The replicas successfully generated voltages between 0.8 and 2 volts, enough to produce a tingling sensation when touched, but not enough for practical work. Connecting multiple jars in series increased voltage to 4 volts. The experiment confirmed that the jars could function as batteries, but didn't prove they were actually used this way. The show concluded the battery hypothesis was plausible but not definitively proven. Electroplating provides the most commonly proposed use for the batteries if they indeed generated electricity. Electroplating uses electric current to deposit metal ions onto a conductive surface. Gold plating coating base metal objects with thin gold layers was practiced in ancient times. Objects from Mesopotamia show gold-plated copper and bronze artifacts. Traditional plating methods involved heating metal and applying gold leaf with adhesives, or using mercury gilding, a toxic process involving gold-mercury amalgam that releases mercury vapor when heated. If ancient craftsmen discovered electroplating, it would have been safer and produced better results than mercury gilding. Experimental archaeology has tested electroplating with Baghdad battery replicas. In 1978, Arne Egerbrecht at the Roma and Pelizaeus Museum in Hildesheim, Germany, connected replica batteries in series and used them to electroplate a silver figurine with gold. The experiment took several hours, but successfully deposited a thin gold layer, demonstrating feasibility. However, this doesn't prove ancient people used batteries this way. The experiment showed what's possible, not what actually happened. Direct evidence of ancient electroplating microscopic gold layer structures, consistent with electrode position, rather than mechanical gilding, has not been found on Parthian artifacts. Alternative explanations for the jar's purpose are more straightforward. The most probable explanation is that they were used for storing scrolls. Scroll cases from the same period and region have similar construction, cylindrical containers with asphalt sealing. The copper cylinders might have protected valuable documents from moisture and insects. The iron rods could have been spacers or supports. Many similar jars have been found containing rolls of papyrus or parchment, supporting the scroll case interpretation. This explanation requires no knowledge of electricity and fits archaeological context better than the battery hypothesis. Another possibility is that the jars were used in magical or religious rituals. Mesopotamian cultures had complex religious practices involving ritual objects. Jars containing metals and liquids might have had symbolic significance, copper and iron, representing different deities or cosmic principles. Bitumen sealing suggests the contents were important or secret. The slight electric shock from handling a charged battery might have seemed magical to people with no understanding of electricity, potentially giving the jars ritual significance. However, this is speculative, and no textual evidence describes such uses. The absence of wires, conductors, or other electrical components in archaeological context argues against the battery interpretation. If ancient people generated electricity for practical purposes like electroplating, we'd expect to find associated equipment wires or metal strips for conducting current, other electrochemical devices, or workshop areas where electroplating occurred. No such evidence exists. The jars appear isolated artifacts without supporting context. This suggests either they weren't batteries, or if they were, their use was extremely limited and eventually forgotten without leaving archaeological traces beyond the jars themselves. No ancient texts describe electrical phenomena or applications. Mesopotamian cultures left extensive written records on clay tablets covering medicine, mathematics, astronomy, law, and technology. If they discovered electricity and electroplating, some record should exist. The absence of textual evidence doesn't definitively rule out ancient electricity knowledge could have been lost or held secret, but it makes the battery hypothesis less likely. Occam's razor suggests the simpler explanation. The jars served mundane purposes like storage, and their resemblance to batteries is coincidental. Similar artifacts have been found at Seleucia on the Tigris, a Parthian city south of Baghdad. Several jars with copper cylinders and iron rods were excavated from Parthian-era layers. These finds confirm the design wasn't unique to one site, but was perhaps a regional standard for some purpose. The distribution across multiple sites makes the scroll case interpretation more plausible standard containers for documents than the battery interpretation. If batteries were being manufactured at multiple locations, we'd expect more variation in design as different craftsmen experimented with optimization. The consistent design suggests a functional, non-experimental purpose. The Baghdad battery has become a favorite of alternative historians who claim it proves advanced ancient technology or lost civilizations. Television programs and books present the battery as evidence that ancient people understood electricity 2,000 years before modern science. However, mainstream archaeology and historians of technology remain skeptical. The evidence is ambiguous. The jars could generate electricity, but probably didn't serve that purpose. The appeal of the battery interpretation lies in its mystery and implied ancient sophistication. But scientific evaluation favors simpler explanations. The Baghdad battery illustrates how ambiguous artifacts can be interpreted in multiple ways, and how spectacular interpretations gain public attention despite lacking strong evidence. The London hammer embedded in 400 million year rock. The London hammer is an iron hammer discovered in June 1936 by Max Hahn and his wife near London, Texas. The hammer was encased in a nodule of limestone-like rock. The Hahns found the rock with the hammer's handle protruding from it along a creek bed. Creationists claim the hammer is embedded in Ordovician limestone, approximately 400 million years old, which would imply that humans or human-like toolmakers existed 400 million years ago, long before life even emerged onto land, let alone evolved into humans. This claim is used to argue that evolutionary timelines are wrong and that the Earth is much younger than mainstream geology indicates. The Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas, acquired the hammer and has displayed it since 1983. The museum's founder, Carl Bohr, promotes young Earth creationism and uses the hammer as evidence that humans coexisted with dinosaurs and that the Earth is only 6,000 to 10,000 years old. Bohr claims the hammer is too sophisticated to be a 19th or early 20th century tool, based on the metal's composition and the preservation of the wooden handle. He argues that the rock surrounding the hammer is definitely Ordovician based on geological formation in the area. However, these claims don't withstand scientific scrutiny. The rock encasing the hammer is not Ordovician limestone, but a recent concretion formed through natural mineralization processes. Concretions form when minerals precipitate from groundwater and cement sediment, or objects together. Calcium carbonate, the main component of limestone, commonly precipitates around objects in limestone regions, where groundwater is saturated with dissolved calcium. The process happens relatively quickly. Concretions can form around modern objects like nails, bottles, or tools within decades to centuries if conditions are favourable. The rock surrounding the London hammer likely formed in the last 100 to 200 years, not 400 million years ago. The hammer itself is clearly a modern tool from the late 19th or early 20th century. The head is forged iron with manufacturing characteristics consistent with 1800s American toolmaking. The wooden handle is partially fossilized, mineralized with calcium carbonate, but this doesn't indicate great age. Wood can mineralize rapidly in calcium-rich environments. The tool's style and construction match hammers manufactured in the United States during the late 1800s when London, Texas was being settled. The most parsimonious explanation is that a miner or farmer lost the hammer between 1860 and 1900, and it became encased in a concretion formed from lime-rich water percolating through the limestone bedrock. Geologists have examined the rock and found it's not stratified bedrock, but a secondary nodule. True Ordovician limestone in the London, Texas region consists of hard, stratified rock layers deposited in ancient seas 450 million years ago. The rock around the hammer is softer, lacking the compaction and fossil content characteristic of ancient limestone. It resembles travertine or tufa, freshwater limestone deposits that form around springs and seeps. These deposits form quickly when calcium-saturated water evaporates, leaving calcium carbonate that cements any objects present. The nodule containing the hammer is a concretion, not original bedrock. No credible scientific institution has confirmed the hammer's age as 400 million years. The Creation Evidence Museum has not allowed independent testing of the hammer, preventing radiocarbon dating, metallurgical analysis, or petrographic examination of the encasing rock. Carl Bau claims he had the hammer's metal analyzed and found it was 96% iron with chlorine and sulfur impurities, which he asserts is unusual. However, these elements are common in iron ores and forged iron. The refusal to allow independent peer-reviewed analysis raises questions about the claims. Legitimate scientific discoveries are published in peer-reviewed journals where experts can examine evidence and methodology. The London hammer has never been subjected to this process. The Glen Rose area, where the hammer was found, is famous among creationists for other controversial claims. The Paluxy River near Glen Rose has limestone bedrock containing dinosaur footprints from the Cretaceous period 113 million years ago. Some creationists have claimed that human footprints appear alongside dinosaur tracks, arguing that humans and dinosaurs coexisted. However, detailed investigation by geologists and paleontologists, including studies by Glenn Cuban in the 1980 seconds, showed that the supposed human prints were either eroded dinosaur prints, carvings made by hoaxers, or natural depressions in rock. No credible evidence supports human-dinosaur coexistence. The iron in the hammer shows no signs of 400 million year antiquity. Iron corrodes relatively quickly when exposed to water and oxygen. Unprotected iron tools from the 1800s show extensive rust and deterioration. If the hammer truly sat in rock for 400 million years, the metal would have completely oxidized to iron minerals, leaving at most a rust stain in the rock. The hammer's metal is in relatively good condition, showing only surface corrosion consistent with 100 to 150 years of burial in oxygen-poor conditions inside the concretion. The concretion itself protected the metal from rapid oxidation by limiting water and oxygen contact, preserving it better than if it had been exposed. Misidentification of concretions as ancient rock is common among non-geologists. Concretions can look remarkably like solid bedrock, especially after weathering. They form around any object: bones, shells, wood, metal in sedimentary environments where dissolved minerals precipitate. Famous examples include the Muiraki boulders in New Zealand, large spherical concretions formed around organic cores, and countless smaller nodules found in limestone and sandstone regions worldwide. Finding modern objects in concretions doesn't challenge geological timescales. It demonstrates natural mineralization processes that occur continuously. The London hammer is presented as out-of-place artifact, or oupart, an object that appears in a context where it shouldn't exist according to conventional understanding. Creationists and alternative historians collect OOPArts as evidence that mainstream science is wrong about Earth's age or human history. However, most OOPArts result from misidentification, misunderstanding of geology, or deliberate hoaxes. When properly investigated by experts, OOPArts invariably have natural explanations that fit conventional science. The London hammer is typical, it appears, anomalous only if one misidentifies the surrounding rock and ignores the tool's obvious modern construction. The persistence of the London hammer claim illustrates how misinformation spreads despite debunking. The hammer is featured in creationist literature, videos, and museum displays as proof that evolutionary timelines are wrong. Many people encounter these claims without seeing the scientific rebuttals. The narrative is compelling a mysterious artifact that challenges established knowledge, appealing to those who distrust mainstream science or seek evidence for their religious beliefs. However, the scientific community considers the London hammer case closed. It's a 19th century hammer encased in a recent concretion, with no implications for geology, evolution, or human antiquity. The London hammer serves as a case study in critical thinking about archaeological and geological claims. Questions to ask include: has the artifact been examined by independent experts? Has the research been published in peer-reviewed journals? Are alternative explanations considered? Are claims based on actual evidence or speculation? In this case, the hammer hasn't been independently studied, hasn't appeared in scientific literature, and has a straightforward natural explanation. The extraordinary claim that humans existed 400 million years ago requires extraordinary evidence, which the London hammer utterly fails to provide. It remains a modern tool in a modern concretion, important only as an example of how not to do archaeology. The ancient nuclear war theory in Mohenjo-Daro. Mohenjo-Daro, meaning Mound of the Dead, is one of the largest settlements of the ancient Indus Valley civilization, located in present-day Sindh, Pakistan. The city flourished from approximately 2,500 to 1,900 BCE during the Bronze Age. At its peak, Mohenjo-Daro had an estimated population of 35,000 to 40,000, featuring sophisticated urban planning with grid-pattern streets, advanced drainage systems, multi-story brick buildings, and public baths. The civilization's decline and abandonment around 1900 BCE remain debated, with proposed causes including climate change, river course changes, or invasion. Some alternative researchers have claimed that Mohenjo-Daro was destroyed by an ancient nuclear war, citing supposed evidence of intense heat and radiation claims that mainstream archaeology completely rejects. The nuclear war hypothesis gained attention through the writings of British investigator David Davenport in the 1979 book Atomic Destruction in 2000 BC. Davenport claimed to have found evidence of nuclear blast, including vitrified bricks, bricks fused into glass by extreme heat radioactive skeletons, and an epicenter of destruction corresponding to a nuclear explosion's ground zero. He argued that temperatures reaching 1,500 to 2,000 degrees Celsius melted pottery and bricks, and that the rapid, violent destruction suggested a nuclear blast rather than conventional warfare or natural disaster. Davenport's work has been cited by ancient astronaut theorists who propose that extraterrestrial visitors nuked ancient cities, though no credible evidence supports these claims. Archaeological evidence contradicts the nuclear war hypothesis. Excavations at Mohenjo-Daro have uncovered no mass casualties or sudden destruction layers. The site shows gradual abandonment rather than catastrophic destruction. Buildings remained standing with walls intact, inconsistent with nuclear blast. If a nuclear explosion occurred, we'd expect flattened structures, cratering at ground zero, and a distinct destruction horizon in the stratigraphy. none of these features exist. The city's decline appears to have happened over decades as inhabitants gradually left, possibly due to environmental changes making the area less habitable. The vitrified bricks cited as evidence are normal-fired bricks, not nuclear-melted material. Vitrification, turning material into glass through extreme heat, requires temperatures above 1,200 degrees Celsius. However, ancient brick-making involved firing clay in kilns at temperatures between 900 and 1,100 degrees Celsius, which can partially vitrify brick surfaces, creating a glassy appearance. This is a normal result of ceramic production, not nuclear effects. Furthermore, true nuclear vitrification produces distinctive morphology and chemical signatures, radioactive isotopes, and specific glass structures that aren't found in Mohenjo-Daro bricks. Laboratory analysis of the bricks shows they're ordinary kiln-fired ceramics. The claim of radioactive skeletons is false. No elevated radiation has been detected at Mohenjo-Daro beyond normal background levels. Archaeological excavations since the 1922 have uncovered human remains, and none show signs of acute radiation exposure. Nuclear explosions produce radioactive fallout isotopes like strontium-90, cesium-137, and plutonium that persist for decades to centuries. Even after 4,000 years, significant traces would remain if a nuclear detonation occurred. Geiger counter-surveys of the site show no anomalies. Claims of radioactive skeletons originated from misinterpreted or fabricated evidence without scientific verification. The supposed epicenter of destruction is similarly unfounded. No area of Mohenjo-Daro shows concentrated damage radiating outward from a central point. The site's architecture is relatively uniform. In preservation, some areas are better preserved than others due to differences in excavation, weathering, and erosion, not because of an ancient explosion. The gradual slope of ruins reflects natural collapse and sedimentation over millennia, not blast effects. If a nuclear weapon detonated over the city, we'd see asymmetric destruction patterns, with buildings leaning away from the blast center and debris patterns showing directional force. None of this exists at Mohenjo-Daro. Natural fires are common at archaeological sites and can produce localized high temperatures without nuclear weapons. Clay and brick structures sometimes catch fire from lightning strikes, cooking accidents, or warfare. Fires burning at 900 to 1,100 degrees Celsius can partially melt brick and clay, creating the vitrified surfaces that Davenport misinterpreted. Archaeological sites worldwide show evidence of ancient fires, charcoal layers, ash, heat-damaged structures without invoking nuclear war. Mohenjo-Daro has evidence of occasional fires, which is unsurprising for a city inhabited for 600 years. These fires were isolated events, not city-wide conflagrations from nuclear blast. The Indus Valley civilization's decline has multiple possible explanations rooted in environmental and climatic change. Around 2000 BCE, the monsoon rains that sustained agriculture in the region weakened due to shifts in atmospheric circulation patterns. River systems changed course. The Gagahakra river system, which may have been the Sarasvati River mentioned in Vedic texts, dried up around this time. With less rainfall and failing rivers, agriculture became unsustainable, forcing populations to migrate. Archaeological evidence shows gradual abandonment of Indus Valley cities rather than sudden destruction. Mohenjo-Daro's residents left slowly, taking possessions with them, inconsistent with catastrophic destruction. Ancient texts have been misinterpreted to support the nuclear war hypothesis. The Mahabharata, an ancient Indian epic, contains descriptions of devastating weapons called Brahmastra and other divine weapons wielded by gods and heroes. Some passages describe explosions, intense light, and widespread destruction. Alternative researchers interpret these as descriptions of nuclear weapons, arguing that ancient Indians witnessed nuclear war and recorded it in mythology. However, the Mahabharata was composed between 400 BCE and 400 CE, centuries after Mohenjo-Daro's abandonment, and is mythology and religious literature, not history. The poetic descriptions of weapons are metaphorical and exaggerated, not literal accounts of nuclear devices. The ancient nuclear war theory depends on ignoring evidence and misrepresenting archaeology. No reputable archaeologist or historian supports the hypothesis. Peer-reviewed journals have never published research supporting it. The claims persist in popular books and documentaries, targeting audiences unfamiliar with actual archaeological findings. The theory appeals to those seeking evidence of advanced ancient technology or extraterrestrial intervention in human history, but it lacks any credible foundation. Mohenjo-Daro was not destroyed by nuclear war. It was gradually abandoned due to environmental changes and possibly invasions or social upheaval, mundane explanations supported by actual evidence. The persistence of the nuclear war myth demonstrates how pseudo-archaeology distorts understanding of the past. Real archaeology reveals that ancient peoples built remarkable civilizations using Stone Age and Bronze Age technology without requiring anachronistic advanced technology. The Indus Valley Civilization achieved sophisticated urban planning, sanitation, metallurgy, and trade networks without nuclear weapons or extraterrestrial assistance. Their accomplishments are impressive precisely because they achieved so much with limited technology. Inventing nuclear wars diminishes rather than honors ancient achievements by suggesting they needed impossible technology rather than recognizing their genuine ingenuity and engineering skill. Modern archaeology uses scientific methods to test claims. When extraordinary assertions are made about ancient sites, archaeologists conduct systematic investigations, radiometric dating, chemical analysis, stratigraphic excavation, comparison with similar sites to evaluate evidence objectively. The nuclear war hypothesis failed every test. No physical, chemical, or radiological evidence supports it. The hypothesis serves as an example of how not to do archaeology, beginning with a sensational conclusion and cherry-picking or fabricating evidence rather than following evidence to conclusions. Mohenjo-Daro remains an important site for understanding Bronze Age urbanism, its mysteries relating to climate, society, and adaptation, not to fictional nuclear wars. The submarine structures off Yonaguni, Japan. The Yonaguni Monument, also called Yonaguni Submarine Ruins, is a formation of rock lying 25 to 30 meters below sea level off the southern coast of Yonaguni Island, the westernmost of the Ryukyu Islands in Japan. Discovered in 1987 by local dive tour operator Kiichiro Aratake, the formation features flat surfaces, right angles, terraces, steps, and apparent pillars. Some researchers, particularly Japanese marine geologist Masaaki Kimura from the University of the Ryukyus, claim the structure is a man-made monument constructed approximately 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, when sea levels were lower during the last ice age. If true, this would represent one of the oldest megalithic structures on Earth, built by an unknown prehistoric civilization. However, most geologists who have examined the formation conclude it's entirely natural. The formation extends roughly 150 meters from east to west and 40 meters from north to south. Its most prominent feature is a series of terraced platforms connected by what appear to be steps or ramps. The largest terrace measures about 10 meters wide. Vertical walls reach heights of several meters. Some surfaces are remarkably flat and smooth. Grooves and channels cut through the rock in patterns that proponents claim are too regular to be natural. A formation resembling a turtle has been identified, and another area features what some interpret as carved faces or symbols. Divers have photographed the site extensively, and it has become a popular dive attraction despite the strong currents that make diving challenging. Masaki Kimura has led investigations of the Yonaguni Monument since 1992, publishing papers arguing for artificial origin. Kimura points to the structure's symmetry, the presence of what he identifies as quarry marks and tool marks on surfaces, the alignment of features with cardinal directions, and the improbability that erosion alone could produce such regular features. He has identified what he claims are post holes, roads, and ceremonial platforms. Kimura suggests the monument was built when the area was above water between 10,000 and 12,000 years ago, then submerged as sea levels rose following the last ice age. He proposes the builders were ancestors of the Jomon culture that inhabited Japan from 14,000 to 300 BCE. Geological consensus opposes Kimura's interpretation. Robert Schoch, a geologist from Boston University who examined the formation in 1997, concluded it's primarily natural. Schoch noted that the rock is fine sandstone and mudstone of the Ayama group, formed about 20 million years ago. These sedimentary rocks are deposited in parallel horizontal layers. The rock also has sets of parallel joints and fractures from tectonic activity. When erosion removes less resistant layers along bedding planes and joints, the result is terraces, right angles, and step-like features that can appear artificial but form naturally. Schoch acknowledged that some minor human modification might have occurred, but saw no evidence requiring substantial human construction. Similar natural formations exist worldwide. The Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland consists of hexagonal basalt columns forming geometric patterns that appear artificial but result from cooling and fracturing of lava flows. The tessellated pavement in Tasmania shows rectangular patterns in sedimentary rock created by intersecting fracture systems. Closer to Yonaguni, other submarine formations in the Ryukyu Islands display similar terraces and right angles, all acknowledged as natural. The regularity of the Yonaguni Formation reflects the regularity of geological processes, bedding planes and fracture sets, not human design. Nature frequently produces geometric patterns through repetitive processes operating on homogeneous materials. The dating of the monument is problematic. If the structure is man-made, it must have been built when the site was above water. Sea levels were approximately 40 meters lower during the last glacial maximum, around 20,000 years ago. The Yonaguni Formation, at 25 to 30 meters depth, would have been above water from roughly 20,000 to 10,000 years ago, becoming submerged as glaciers melted and sea levels rose. But archaeological evidence from Japan during this period shows only hunter-gatherer societies with simple stone tools. The Jomon culture, beginning around 14,000 years ago, made pottery and lived in pit dwellings, but didn't construct megalithic monuments. No evidence suggests the organizational capacity or motivation for building large stone structures during this period. No artifacts have been found at the Yonaguni Monument to support human activity. If the site was a worked monument or quarry, we'd expect to find tools, debris from stoneworking, or other signs of human presence. Underwater archaeological sites from comparable ages, like the submerged caves in Mexico, containing 13,000-year-old human remains, and artifacts, preserve artifacts, and organic materials. The Yonaguni Formation has yielded no pottery, tools, bones, or other materials clearly associated with human activity. Some divers claim to have found tool marks and holes that might have held posts, but these features are ambiguous and could be natural depressions or grooves caused by erosion. Erosion patterns at Yonaguni are consistent with natural processes. The strong Kuroshio current flows past Yonaguni at speeds up to 3 meters per second, capable of eroding soft rock and transporting sediment. Typhoons and storms generate powerful wave action that reaches depths of 30 meters, especially during the lower sea levels when the formation was shallower. Biological erosion from boring organisms and chemical weathering from seawater dissolution further shape the rock. These processes preferentially erode along bedding planes and fractures, creating the terraced appearance. The formation shows no signs of construction techniques, no mortar, no worked surfaces with tool marks characteristic of human shaping, no evidence of quarrying. Alternative researchers have suggested astronomical alignments at Yonaguni, claiming the structure was oriented to solar or stellar events. However, finding alignments with celestial objects is trivial with enough lines, angles, and directions on a sufficiently complex formation. Some will align with significant astronomical events by chance. Rigorous analysis of claimed alignments must account for the multiple comparisons problem. Testing many hypotheses increases the probability of false positives. No robust statistical analysis has demonstrated that Yonaguni alignments exceed chance expectations. Moreover, if builders oriented the structure astronomically, we'd expect associated archaeological remains indicating the culture's astronomical knowledge, which don't exist. The Yonaguni monument has become a pilgrimage site for those believing in lost civilizations. Books, documentaries, and websites present it as evidence of Lemuria, Mu, or Atlantis mythical sunken continents proposed by 19th and early 20th century writers. These continents were supposedly home to advanced prehistoric civilizations that sank beneath the waves, leaving only rare ruins like Yonaguni. However, geological and oceanographic surveys have conclusively shown that no lost continents exist in the Pacific or Atlantic. The ocean floor is well mapped, and its structure is understood through plate tectonics. Yonaguni Island sits on the Eurasian continental shelf, not on a sunken continent. Schoch's assessment remains the mainstream scientific position. He stated in interviews that the formation is essentially natural, but acknowledged that minor human interaction, perhaps ancient peoples climbed on the rocks, carved a few marks, or used the site for ceremonial purposes when it was above water, is possible. This conservative position recognizes that humans were present in the region and might have interacted with the formation without requiring that they built it. Natural formations were sometimes incorporated into prehistoric sacred landscapes. Stonehenge incorporated natural sarsen stones. Ayers Rock in Australia has cultural significance despite being entirely natural. Yonaguni might similarly have been noticed and used by ancient peoples without being constructed by them. The Yonaguni monument serves as a cautionary tale about interpreting geological features. Humans are pattern-seeking animals. We see faces in clouds, animals in constellations, and structures in natural rock formations. This pareidolia extends to interpreting ambiguous formations as artificial when they're natural. The Yonaguni formation's geometric appearance triggers recognition of familiar architectural features, steps, terraces, walls, leading to the impression of artificiality. But geology frequently produces such features through natural processes. Extraordinary claims of a 10,000-year-old monument require extraordinary evidence, definitive proof of human construction, like tools, artifacts, or unambiguous construction techniques. The Yonaguni monument provides none of this, remaining a fascinating natural formation rather than evidence for lost civilizations. The metal spheres in South African mines, 3 billion years old. The Klerksdorp spheres are small spherical to disc-shaped objects found by miners in Precambrian pyrophyllite deposits near Ottosdal in the western Transvaal region of South Africa. The objects range from 2.5 to 10 centimeters in diameter and are composed primarily of pyrite, hematite, or wollastonite naturally occurring minerals. Some spheres have parallel grooves running around their equators, giving them an artificial appearance. The deposits containing the spheres date to approximately 2.8 to 3 billion years ago, during the Precambrian era, long before multicellular life existed on Earth. Some alternative researchers claim these spheres are artificial, manufactured by an unknown intelligent species or even extraterrestrial visitors. However, geological examination conclusively shows the spheres are natural concretions formed through ordinary geological processes. The spheres gained attention through the 1993 book Forbidden Archaeology by Michael Cremo and Richard Thompson, which presents alleged out-of-place artifacts as evidence against evolutionary theory and mainstream archaeology. The book claimed the Klerksdorp spheres were manufactured objects found in 3-billion-year-old rock, suggesting intelligent life existed billions of years before conventional science accepts. This claim has been repeated in numerous alternative history books, websites, and documentaries. The Klerksdorp Museum in South Africa displays several specimens, and museum staff have encountered visitors who believe the spheres are artificial. However, geologists who have studied the specimens agree they're natural mineral formations. The spheres form through concretion, a process where minerals precipitate from groundwater and accumulate around a nucleus, forming rounded masses. Concretions are common in sedimentary rocks worldwide and can take various shapes: spherical, elliptical, disc-shaped, or irregular. The Klerksdorp spheres formed in volcanic ash deposits that were metamorphosed over billions of years. The parent rock, pyrophyllite, is a metamorphic mineral that forms from volcanic ash under moderate heat and pressure. During metamorphism, minerals dissolved and reprecipitated, forming the spherical concretions. The process is well understood and requires no intelligent intervention. The parallel grooves on some spheres are the most intriguing feature cited as evidence of manufacture. These grooves appear too regular to be natural, leading some to suggest they were machined or carved. However, geologists explain the grooves as resulting from the preferential dissolution of certain mineral layers, or from fibrous mineral growth patterns during formation. Pyrophyllite has a layered crystal structure, molecules stack in sheets, and this structure can create linear features during growth or dissolution. The grooves follow the sphere's equators because they formed perpendicular to the compaction direction in the sedimentary deposit, creating a preferred orientation. Similar grooved concretions exist in many geological settings worldwide. Paul Heinrich, a geologist who examined the Klerksdorp spheres, concluded they are limonite and hematite concretions. Limonite is a mixture of hydrated iron oxide minerals that commonly forms nodules and concretions. Hematite is iron oxide that crystallizes in various forms. When these minerals precipitate from iron-rich groundwater percolating through sediments, they can form spherical shapes through a process called Liesgang, banding periodic precipitation creating concentric layers. The grooves might represent weak zones where different mineral layers meet, which erode preferentially when exposed to weathering. Heinrich noted that similar concretions occur in the Navajo sandstone of Utah, where thousands of iron oxide spheres called Moki marbles weather out of the rock. The age of the rock containing the spheres is well established at 2.8 to 3 billion years through radiometric dating. However, the spheres themselves might be younger than the host rock. Concretions form during diagenesis, the chemical and physical changes that transform sediment into rock, or during later metamorphism. The Klerksdorp deposits underwent metamorphism that converted volcanic ash to pyrophyllite sometime after deposition 3 billion years ago. The spheres likely formed during this metamorphic event, perhaps 2.5 to 2 billion years ago, still ancient but not necessarily as old as the original sediments. Determining the sphere's exact age would require dating minerals within the concretions, which hasn't been done. If the spheres were artificial, they would show signs of manufacture. Machined surfaces have characteristic tool mark scratches, cut marks, or polishing marks that reflect the manufacturing process. Natural surfaces show different textures, crystal faces, weathering patterns, or dissolution features. The Klerksdorp spheres display natural mineral surfaces with no indication of cutting or polishing tools. Their composition, pyrite, hematite, wollastonite, consists of common minerals that form naturally. An artificial sphere from 3 billion years ago would presumably be made of processed materials or unusual alloys not found in nature. The Klerksdorp spheres are made of ordinary minerals arranged in ways that commonly occur in sedimentary and metamorphic rocks. The claim that the spheres are 3 billion years old, yet perfectly preserved, strains credibility. Natural processes over such timescales would alter manufactured objects. Metal spheres would oxidize, corrode, or weather. Rock spheres would crack, fracture, or erode. The Klerksdorp spheres show weathering appropriate for natural concretions, surface alterations from dissolution and recrystallization of minerals. They're not pristine manufactured objects, but show the effects of geological processes acting over immense time. Their preservation is consistent with being minerals that crystallized within protective rock matrices, not with being artifacts that survived billions of years of geological activity. The biological context makes artificial origin impossible. 3 billion years ago, Earth's biosphere consisted entirely of single-celled organisms, bacteria and archaea. Multicellular life didn't evolve until around 600 million years ago. Complex organisms with nervous systems, tool-using capability, and technological sophistication didn't exist until the last few 100 million years. Humans and our hominin ancestors evolved only in the last 7 million years. Claiming that manufactured objects exist in 3 billion-year-old rock requires proposing that intelligent toolmakers existed 2.4 billion years before even the simplest animals evolved an extraordinary claim, with no supporting evidence from paleontology, biology, or any other scientific discipline. Similar spherical concretions exist in rock formations worldwide. The Moqui marbles of Utah and Arizona are iron oxide concretions in Jurassic sandstone, approximately 180 million years old. These spheres range from marble-sized to basketball-sized and form through precipitation of iron minerals from groundwater. The Moeraki boulders on Kwaikohi Beach in New Zealand are large spherical concretions up to 3 meters in diameter, composed of calcite crystals cemented together. These boulders formed about 60 million years ago in marine sediments. Cannonball concretions in North Dakota are spherical sandstone nodules formed during the Cretaceous period. All these examples demonstrate that geological processes routinely produce spherical shapes without requiring intelligent manufacture. Museums and geological institutions reject the artificial sphere interpretation. The South African Geological Survey has stated that the Klerksdorp spheres are natural geological formations. Peer-reviewed geological literature treating the spheres describes them as concretions without controversy. The spheres have not been the subject of published research claiming artificial origin in any credible scientific journal. The claims exist solely in alternative archaeology books, creationist literature, and pseudoscientific websites that don't apply rigorous scientific methods. This pattern, rejected by experts but popular in fringe media, is characteristic of pseudo-archaeological claims. The Klerksdorp spheres illustrate how natural objects can appear artificial when we lack understanding of geological processes. Human pattern recognition evolved to detect significant features in the environment. Recognizing faces, shapes, and regularities helps survival. But this same tendency causes us to see design where none exists. A spherical rock with grooves triggers recognition of manufactured objects like bearings or ornaments, leading to erroneous interpretations. Critical examination, analyzing composition, formation mechanisms, and context, reveals natural origins. The Klerksdorp spheres are fascinating examples of nature's ability to create geometric forms, not evidence of impossible ancient technologies or extraterrestrial visitors. They remain what they are: natural mineral concretions formed billions of years ago through ordinary geological processes. The Longyu Caves, carved in 212 BC. The Longyu Caves, also called Longyu Grottos, are a series of 24 artificial caverns discovered in 1,992 inches Longyu County, Zhejiang Province, China. The caves are carved into solid siltstone on Phoenix Hill, with a total excavated volume estimated at 1 million cubic meters. The chambers feature high ceilings up to 30 meters tall, supported by pillars and columns carved from the bedrock. The walls, ceilings, and pillars are decorated with parallel chisel marks, creating uniform patterns resembling fish scales. Despite their impressive scale and precision, no historical records document the cave's construction, creating mystery about who built them, when, why, and where the excavated rock went. While some alternative researchers claim the caves are evidence of advanced ancient technology, mainstream archaeology considers them remarkable but explainable products of Han Dynasty engineering. Local villagers discovered the caves by pumping water from ponds that had existed for generations. The ponds were artificial reservoirs created by groundwater filling the cave chambers after they were carved. When villagers began draining the ponds in 1992, they exposed the cave entrances and realized the ponds were actually the tops of enormous underground chambers. Over the next several years, exploration revealed the extent of the cave system. The largest chamber, Cave 1, covers an area of 2,000 square meters with a depth of 30 meters. The caves are now a tourist attraction, though their origin remains debated. The construction date is uncertain, but likely falls during the Han Dynasty, roughly 206 BCE to 220 CE. Some researchers propose construction around 212 BCE, based on stylistic comparisons with other Han Dynasty structures and the type of tools marks visible on the walls. The parallel chisel marks suggest bronze or iron tools, consistent with Han technology. The lack of historical records is puzzling but not unprecedented. Many ancient construction projects went undocumented, especially if they served military, religious, or secretive purposes. The caves might have been state secrets, or records might have been lost during subsequent dynasties when government archives were destroyed or abandoned. The excavation of 1 million cubic meters of rock raises questions about labor and logistics. Removing this much material would generate roughly 2.5 million tons of rock chips and debris. Where did it go? Proposals include that it was used for nearby construction projects, dumped in rivers, or spread across agricultural fields as soil amendment. The Qiantang River flows nearby and could have transported debris downstream. Alternatively, the rock might have been crushed and used in building projects that no longer exist. Without archaeological surveys specifically looking for Han Dynasty construction using Longyu siltstone, the debris' fate remains unknown. However, the absence of the debris doesn't imply advanced technology, just that we haven't identified where it was deposited. The carving precision has impressed visitors and researchers. The chisel marks are uniform in size and spacing, covering walls and ceilings in consistent patterns. Some interpret this precision as evidence of advanced tools or even laser cutting. However, hand-carved precision is achievable with simple tools, patience, and skilled labor. Roman and Egyptian monuments show comparable precision created with bronze and iron chisels. The fish scale pattern on Longyu walls serves both decorative and practical purposes. The texture prevents smooth surfaces from exfoliating or cracking, prolonging the cave's stability. Similar patterns appear in other hand-carved structures worldwide, demonstrating that ancient craftsmen achieved high precision through skill rather than advanced technology. The pillars supporting the cave ceilings are carved from the bedrock rather than being constructed separately. This construction method, subtractive rather than additive, requires careful planning. Carvers had to visualize the final chamber and pillars before beginning work, removing rock around the pillars to create the open space. This technique appears in other ancient rock-cut architecture, like the Ellora caves in India and Petra in Jordan. The long U pillars' tapered shapes, wider at the base and top, narrower in the middle, reflect engineering knowledge of load distribution, ensuring pillars can support the ceiling weight. This design is sophisticated, but within the capability of ancient engineers familiar with stone construction. The cave's purpose remains speculative. Proposed uses include storage, possibly for grain or military supplies, mining for minerals or water, imperial mausoleums for royalty, military facilities, or religious temples. The lack of artifacts inside the caves provides few clues. If they were tombs, we'd expect sarcophagi, burial goods, or inscriptions. If they were storage, we might find structural features like shelving or ceiling doors. The absence of such features has led to speculation about lost purposes or deliberately concealed functions. However, millennia of flooding the caves were water-filled ponds until 1992 would have washed away portable artifacts and organic materials, removing evidence that might clarify the original purpose. Some researchers have noted acoustic properties in the caves. The chambers have unusual resonance, amplifying sounds and creating echoes. This has led to proposals that the caves were designed as acoustic spaces for music or ceremonies. Ancient cultures worldwide built structures with deliberate acoustic properties, amphitheaters, temples, and ritual spaces designed to enhance sound. The Long U caves might have similar intentional design. However, acoustic properties might also be incidental consequences of chamber geometry rather than primary design goals. Without historical records describing acoustic intentions, we cannot determine whether the cave's sound properties were deliberate or coincidental. The absence of historical records has fueled alternative theories. Some claim the caves are older than the Han Dynasty, perhaps dating to prehistoric times or even being remnants of an advanced lost civilization. However, the tool marks and architectural style are consistent with Han Dynasty technology and aesthetics. The Han Dynasty had sufficient resources and labor to undertake massive projects. The Great Wall's expansion, imperial palaces, and extensive irrigation systems all date to this period. The Long U cave's scale, while impressive, is comparable to other Han projects. Proposing vastly older dates or unknown civilizations requires ignoring the stylistic and technological evidence that places the caves firmly in historical context. Geological investigation has examined the siltstone to understand carving feasibility. The rock is relatively soft Mohs hardness around 2 to 3, making it easier to carve than granite or basalt, but harder than limestone. Bronze and iron tools can carve siltstone effectively with sufficient labor. Experimental archaeology has shown that small teams of workers using reproductions of ancient tools can excavate several cubic meters per day from similar rock. Scaling this to the Long U project, removing 1 million cubic meters would require thousands of workers over decades. A workforce of 1,000 to 2,000 people working for 20 to 30 years could complete the project, a plausible effort for a wealthy Han Dynasty regional government or imperial commission. The caves are structurally stable despite their age, suggesting good engineering. The pillars are sized and positioned to support the ceiling loads. The bedrock's natural strength, combined with thoughtful design, has prevented collapse. Some cracks and erosion have occurred, but overall, the caves remain intact. This longevity demonstrates that ancient engineers understood principles of rock mechanics, stress distribution, pillar placement, and chamber geometry, allowing them to create durable structures. The engineering is impressive, but achieved through empirical knowledge accumulated over generations of stone working, not through impossibly advanced technology. The Longyou caves have attracted pseudo-archaeological attention with claims of laser cutting, anti-gravity technology, or construction by extraterrestrials. These claims lack evidence. The tool marks show characteristics of bronze or iron chisels' irregular surfaces, parallel grooves matching chisel widths, and patterns consistent with hand carving. Laser cutting would produce smooth, melted edges with different surface textures than observed. No chemical or physical analysis of the cave surfaces suggests advanced technology. The claims arise from unfamiliarity with ancient engineering capabilities and a tendency to attribute impressive ancient works to anachronistic technology rather than recognizing human ingenuity. The Longyou caves remain mysterious in purpose and exact dating, but not in construction method or builders. They represent a remarkable achievement of ancient Chinese engineering, comparable to other monumental rock-cut structures worldwide. The mystery surrounding them, particularly the absence of records and artifacts, is frustrating, but not unique. Many ancient sites lack comprehensive documentation, forcing archaeologists to reconstruct purpose and chronology from fragmentary evidence. The Longyou caves demonstrate that ancient civilizations could organize large labor forces, plan complex construction projects, and execute them with skill and precision. The caves don't require invoking lost advanced civilizations. They showcase what historical civilizations accomplished with determination, knowledge, and human labor working over extended periods. The biological evidence from fossil record. The fossil record provides the most direct evidence for the history of life on Earth, documenting the evolution of organisms from the earliest bacteria to modern humans. This record shows no evidence of earlier human-like or technologically capable species before Homo sapiens. Fossils of anatomically modern humans, Homo sapiens, first appear in Morocco approximately 300,000 years ago at sites like Jebel Irhoud. Earlier hominins include Homo erectus appearing 2 million years ago, Australopithecus species from 4 to 2 million years ago, and various other extinct human relatives. But no fossils of intelligent tool-using species exist from earlier periods. If an industrial civilization had existed millions of years ago, fossils of its members should be present in appropriate rock layers. The absence of such fossils strongly argues against pre-human civilizations. Fossilization is rare, but not so rare that entire species would leave no trace. Paleontologists have described over 300,000 fossil species, representing perhaps 1 to 5% of all species that ever lived. Large animals fossilize more readily than small ones. Their bones are more durable and more likely to be preserved. Humans and our ancestors are relatively large mammals, and our populations were substantial even in prehistoric times. If an intelligent species comparable to humans existed 100 million years ago with populations of millions to billions, at least some individuals should have fossilized. The fact that no such fossils have been found across billions of tons of rock examined worldwide makes it extremely unlikely such species existed. Fossils are found systematically in rock layers corresponding to specific geological periods. Trilobites appear in Cambrian through Permian rocks from 521 to 252 million years ago and nowhere else. Dinosaurs appear in rocks from the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous periods 252 to 66 million years ago, and nowhere else except as birds, their modern descendants. Mammals diversified extensively in the Cenozoic era beginning 66 million years ago, after dinosaurs went extinct. This consistent pattern across thousands of locations worldwide shows that the fossil record reliably documents when different organisms lived. If human-like intelligent species existed in the Cretaceous or Carboniferous periods, we should find their fossils in rocks from those times. No such fossils exist. The evolution of intelligence and technology required specific prerequisites that emerged only recently in geological time. Complex nervous systems evolved during the Cambrian explosion 541 million years ago. Land vertebrates appeared around 370 million years ago. Mammals arose around 200 million years ago, but remained small and subordinate to dinosaurs until 66 million years ago. Primates evolved around 60 million years ago. Large brains, disproportionately large relative to body size, developed in the hominin lineage only in the last 3 million years. Each of these steps built on previous evolutionary innovations. Skipping this developmental sequence would require invoking a separate evolutionary lineage that developed intelligence independently, for which no evidence exists. Tool use leaves archaeological traces. The oldest stone tools, simple flaked rocks used for cutting, date to 3.3 million years ago from Lomekwi in Kenya, predating Homo genus and likely made by Australopithecus. By 1.8 million years ago, Homo erectus made more sophisticated Acheulean hand axes that required planning and skill. Tool complexity increased gradually over millions of years, culminating in the diverse toolkits of modern humans from 300,000 years ago onward. An industrial civilization would leave tool evidence vastly more complex than stone flakes. Metal tools, ceramics, concrete, glass, and plastics would appear in the archaeological record if such civilizations existed. Their absence indicates they never existed. Industrial activity generates distinctive signatures in the geological record beyond just artifacts. Burning fossil fuels produces carbon dioxide with specific isotopic ratios, as discussed earlier. Mining operations create distinctive landscape modifications, open pits, spoil heaps, and mineral processing waste. Smelting operations produce slag waste material from extracting metal from ore, with chemical compositions that don't occur naturally. Agriculture creates pollen records showing cultivated plant species replacing wild vegetation. Urbanization creates compacted soil layers and altered sedimentation patterns. None of these signatures appear in rocks predating human activity, except as explained by natural processes. Mass extinctions in the fossil record correlate with natural events, not industrial collapse. The 5 major mass extinctions: End Ordovician, 443 million years ago; Late Devonian, 375 million years ago; End Permian, 252 million years ago; End Triassic, 201 million years ago; and End Cretaceous, 66 million years ago, are linked to volcanism, asteroid impacts, or climate change. The extinction patterns match what these natural catastrophes would produce. If industrial civilizations existed and collapsed, we might expect to see different patterns. Rapid extinction of large terrestrial species, followed by recovery as ecosystems rebounded. Instead, mass extinctions show patterns consistent with natural causes, like widespread volcanic eruptions, poisoning oceans, or asteroid impacts, causing global wildfires and nuclear winters. Biomass composition through time also argues against pre-human industrial civilizations. Throughout Earth's history, biomass, the total mass of living organisms, has been dominated by bacteria, followed by plants, then animals. Humans and domestic animals now comprise a disproportionate fraction of mammalian biomass due to agriculture and civilization. If another industrial species had existed, its period should show similar biomass anomalies, disproportionate abundance of that species, and its domesticated plants or animals in the fossil record. No such anomalies appear in any geological period. The biomass distribution is always consistent with natural ecosystems without industrial manipulation. The human lineage's evolutionary history is well documented through fossils. Ardipithecus ramidus from 4.4 million years ago shows early bipedalism. Australopithecus afarensis, from 3.9 to 2.9 million years ago, including the famous Lucy skeleton, walked upright but had small brains. Homo habilis, from 2.4 to 1.4 million years ago, had larger brains and made stone tools. Homo erectus, from 2 to 0.1 million years ago, had brains approaching modern size and spread across Africa and Eurasia. Homo neanderthalensis and Homo sapiens evolved from Homo heidelbergensis around 600,000 to 300,000 years ago. This gradual progression from small-brained apes to large-brained humans is documented by hundreds of fossil specimens showing intermediate forms. No similar evolutionary sequence appears in earlier periods. If intelligent species existed millions of years before humans, they would have had to evolve intelligence independently from a different lineage. Convergent evolution, where different lineages evolve similar features independently, is common for physical traits like wings, eyes, or streamlined body shapes. Intelligence has evolved multiple times in different groups. Primates, cetaceans, corvids, parrots, and octopuses all show sophisticated cognitive abilities. However, technological civilization creating complex tools, using fire, developing language, building cities, has evolved only once in Earth's 4.5 billion year history, as far as evidence shows. The evolution of technological civilization might be a rare event requiring a specific combination of circumstances that occurred only in the hominin lineage. The Silurian Hypothesis paper discussed how a pre-human industrial civilization might be detected. Key markers would include unusual concentrations of metals like lead, copper, or platinum in sediment layers, synthetic molecules like plastics or pesticides, unusual isotopic ratios of carbon, nitrogen, or sulfur, abrupt changes in pollen assemblages indicating agriculture, and fossils of the species itself. Extensive geological and paleontological surveys have examined rocks from all time periods. No layers show combinations of these markers that can't be explained by natural processes. The absence of these signatures in pre-human rocks, combined with the absence of fossils of intelligent species, strongly supports the conclusion that humans are Earth's first and only technological civilization. The fossil record's completeness varies with geological period, but even in poorly sampled periods, we have sufficient fossils to rule out large-bodied, intelligent species. The Mesozoic era is well sampled due to extensive fossil collecting. The Paleozoic era has less complete sampling, but still includes millions of fossils. Even the Precambrian era, where multicellular fossils are rare, has enough samples to show that only simple organisms existed. No gap in the fossil record is large enough to hide an industrial civilization. Such a civilization would leave pervasive traces in multiple geological systems, not just fossils, but geochemical anomalies, landscape modifications, and artifact distributions, none of which have been found in pre-human rocks. The plate tectonics recycling Earth's surface. Plate tectonics is the fundamental process driving geological change on Earth, constantly creating new crust and destroying old crust through a cycle of spreading and subduction. This recycling has profound implications for detecting ancient civilizations. Oceanic crust, the basaltic rock forming the ocean floors, is created at mid-ocean ridges where tectonic plates diverge and mantle material upwells. As new crust forms at ridges, older crust moves away, eventually reaching subduction zones where it descends into the mantle and melts. The entire cycle takes approximately 200 million years, meaning the oldest ocean floor is only 280 million years old, found in the eastern Mediterranean Sea. Any evidence of civilizations on ocean floors older than 280 million years has been destroyed by subduction. The discovery of seafloor spreading came in the 1,960 seconds through surveys of the ocean floor. Scientists found that magnetic minerals in oceanic crust record Earth's magnetic field direction at the time of formation. As basaltic lava erupts at mid-ocean ridges and cools, magnetic minerals align with Earth's magnetic field, creating a record of the field's direction. Earth's magnetic field reverses polarity. Irregularly north and south poles flip approximately every 200,000 to 300,000 years. The seafloor shows symmetric patterns of magnetic stripes paralleling mid-ocean ridges, with each stripe representing a period of normal or reversed polarity. This pattern, combined with radiometric dating, confirmed that ocean floor continuously forms at ridges and spreads outward at rates of 2 to 10 centimeters per year. The Atlantic Ocean is expanding at about 2.5 centimeters per year as the mid-Atlantic ridge creates new crust. The Pacific Ocean is shrinking as oceanic crust subducts beneath continents along the Ring of Fire, the chain of volcanoes and earthquake zones surrounding the Pacific. The Pacific Plate subducts beneath the Eurasian Plate at the Mariana Trench, the deepest point in the ocean, at 10,994 meters at about 7 centimeters per year. Over 200 million years, this motion has recycled the entire Pacific Ocean floor, destroying any evidence that might have existed on older crust. If an ancient civilization existed primarily in coastal regions or ocean-based structures more than 200 million years ago, subduction would have erased most traces. Continental crust is older and more stable than oceanic crust. Continental rocks are less dense than oceanic rocks, primarily granite rather than basalt, so they resist subduction. When oceanic crust subducts beneath continental crust, the dense oceanic plate descends into the mantle, while the lighter continental plate remains at the surface. This process has preserved continental rocks for billions of years. The oldest continental rocks are over 4 billion years old, and substantial areas of every continent expose rocks older than 1 billion years. Evidence of ancient civilizations would be more likely to survive on continents than ocean floors, provided the evidence was incorporated into sediments that weren't subsequently eroded or metamorphosed. Subduction creates distinctive geological features. Volcanic arcs form above subduction zones as the descending plate melts and magma rises through the overlying plate, creating chains of volcanoes like the Andes, Cascades, or Japanese archipelago. Deep ocean trenches mark where the oceanic plate bends downward into the mantle. Earthquakes occur along the subduction interface as plates grind against each other. These processes make subduction zones geologically violent, with frequent earthquakes and eruptions. Any evidence of civilization caught in a subduction zone would be destroyed by the intense heat and pressure as the descending plate melts. Temperatures reach 1,000 degrees Celsius within 50 kilometers of depth, sufficient to destroy any materials. The subduction of oceanic crust means that most of Earth's surface from before 200 million years ago has been destroyed. The ocean floors comprise 71% of Earth's surface. If we assume civilizations distribute randomly across Earth's surface, 71% of ancient civilization traces would be on ocean floors. Of that 71%, everything older than 280 million years has been subducted and destroyed. Only evidence on the 29% of Earth's surface that is continental has potential to survive more than 200 million years. This dramatically reduces the probability of finding evidence from very ancient times. An ocean-based civilization existing 500 million years ago would leave virtually no trace unless it also built extensively on land. Continental rocks undergo recycling through different processes than ocean floor. Weathering and erosion remove surface layers, transporting sediments to basins where they're deposited and eventually lithified into new sedimentary rocks. The cycle of uplift, erosion, deposition, and lithification transforms rocks over tens to hundreds of millions of years. Mountain ranges, like the Himalayas, rose through collision of continental plates, exposing deep crustal rocks to erosion. The eroded material washes into oceans, forming sediments that may eventually be uplifted again as new mountains. This cycle doesn't destroy rocks as completely as subduction does, but it transforms them, making preservation of surface features or artifacts unlikely over timescales exceeding 100 million years. Metamorphism, the transformation of rocks through heat and pressure, further alters continental rocks. When rocks are buried deeply through tectonic processes, temperatures and pressures increase. At depths of 10 to 30 kilometers, temperatures reach 300 to 700 degrees Celsius, causing minerals to recrystallize. The original rock textures and structures are obliterated, forming new metamorphic rocks like schist, gneiss, or marble. Any fossils or artifacts in the original rocks would be destroyed by metamorphism. Metamorphic rocks are abundant in continental shields, the ancient, stable cores of continents, indicating that much of the continental crust has been metamorphosed at least once, destroying original features. Despite these recycling processes, some continental rocks preserve ancient features remarkably well. Sedimentary rocks deposited in stable basins like the interior of continents, away from active tectonic margins, can remain undisturbed for billions of years. The Jack Hill zircons from Australia, 4.4 billion years old, survived through multiple cycles of erosion and redeposition because they're chemically and mechanically resistant. The Burgess Shale in Canada preserves soft-bodied organisms from 508 million years ago in exquisite detail because the rocks were buried rapidly and never heated or deformed significantly. These examples show that exceptional preservation can occur, but it requires specific circumstances: rapid burial, stable geological setting, and avoidance of metamorphism or erosion. For evidence of ancient civilizations to survive geological recycling, it must be incorporated into stable sedimentary sequences that avoid metamorphism and subduction. The ideal preservation sites would be in continental interiors, far from plate boundaries, in sedimentary basins that were rapidly buried and remained stable. Civilizations existing in such locations might leave traces in the rock record, but civilizations that existed in tectonically active regions, on continental margins, or on ocean floors would leave little to no trace after tens of millions of years. The geography of an ancient civilization would determine whether any evidence survived to the present. Given that much of Earth's surface undergoes active tectonics, most ancient civilization traces would be destroyed. The timescales of tectonic processes constrain how far back we can look for civilizations. Ocean floor recycling operates on 200 million year timescales, providing an absolute limit for ocean-based preservation. Continental weathering and erosion remove surface features over tens of millions of years. Metamorphism affects rocks over hundreds of millions of years as continents collide and mountain ranges form. Taking these processes together, detecting physical artifacts or structures from civilizations older than 100 million years seems virtually impossible. Geochemical signatures in stable sedimentary rocks might survive longer, but even those would be obscure and difficult to distinguish from natural processes after hundreds of millions of years. Plate tectonics explains why finding evidence of ancient civilizations is so challenging, even if they existed. Earth is a geologically active planet, constantly renewing its surface through tectonic processes. Other planets with inactive tectonics like Mars preserve surface features much longer. The Martian surface includes rocks and landforms billions of years old, undisturbed by plate tectonics. If Mars ever hosted civilizations, evidence might survive much longer than on Earth. Earth's geological activity, while making the planet habitable through its role in climate regulation and nutrient cycling, also erases most traces of the past. Any ancient civilization would have to leave extremely durable markers in precisely the right geological setting to remain detectable hundreds of millions of years later. The recycling of Earth's surface by plate tectonics is one reason the Silurian hypothesis question is so interesting. Even if industrial civilizations existed tens of millions of years ago, finding evidence is extremely difficult because most rocks from those times have been destroyed or transformed. The challenge isn't just that civilizations are hard to detect, it's that Earth itself actively removes the evidence through its geological processes. This realization highlights how much of Earth's history is irretrievably lost. Entire eras, with whatever events occurred during them, have been subducted into the mantle or metamorphosed beyond recognition. The portions of Earth's history we can study are those preserved in the limited rock record that escaped recycling a biased and incomplete sample of the full history. The scientific consensus and remaining mysteries. The scientific consensus across geology, paleontology, archaeology, and biology is clear. No credible evidence supports the existence of industrial or technologically advanced civilizations on Earth before Homo sapiens. Humans and our hominin ancestors are the only known species to develop complex tools, language, agriculture, and industrial technology. The fossil record documents the evolution of our lineage from primate ancestors, showing gradual development of larger brains, bipedalism, and tool use over millions of years. The archaeological record traces human cultural evolution from simple stone tools 3.3 million years ago to modern industrial civilization. No anomalies in either record suggest earlier technological species. This consensus is based on overwhelming positive evidence, millions of fossils, thousands of archaeological sites, and comprehensive geological surveys, not on absence of evidence. Claims of ancient advanced civilizations rely on misinterpretation of natural formations, misidentification of artifacts, or fabrication of evidence. The Klerksdorp spheres are natural mineral concretions, not manufactured objects. The London hammer is a 19th century tool in a recent concretion, not a 400 million-year-old artifact. The Yonaguni monument is a natural rock formation shaped by erosion, not a sunken city. The Baghdad battery is probably a scroll storage jar, not an ancient electrical device. Mohenjo-Daro was not destroyed by nuclear war, but abandoned due to environmental changes. The Piri Reis map shows South America and speculative southern lands, not ice-free Antarctica. Each claim, when examined critically by experts, reveals mundane explanations without requiring lost civilization. The question of what evidence would survive from a pre-human industrial civilization remains important. The Silurian hypothesis outlined potential markers, carbon and nitrogen isotope anomalies from fossil fuel combustion or agriculture, elevated concentrations of industrial metals like lead and mercury, synthetic molecules like plastics or pesticides, increased erosion rates from deforestation or agriculture, and fossils of the civilization's biological members. Extensive geological and geochemical surveys have examined rocks from all time periods. No layers show combinations of these anomalies that can't be explained by natural processes like volcanism, methane release from permafrost or ocean sediments, or asteroid impacts. The absence of these signatures strongly suggests no industrial civilizations preceded humans. Some mysteries in Earth's history remain unexplained, but none require invoking ancient civilizations. The great unconformity, the massive gap in the rock record between 1.2 billion and 550 million years ago, results from global erosion during snowball Earth glaciations and tectonic uplift, not from evidence destruction by lost civilizations. The Younger Dryas climate shift 12,800 years ago resulted from ocean circulation disruption when glacial lakes drained, not from comet impacts destroying civilizations. The rapid Cambrian explosion of complex life 541 million years ago reflects the evolution of developmental genes and rising oxygen levels, not genetic engineering by ancient or alien civilizations. Natural processes explain these events without requiring technological intervention. Göbekli Tepe demonstrates that prehistoric hunter-gatherers were more sophisticated than previously believed, capable of monumental architecture 11,600 years ago. But this sophistication doesn't require a lost advanced civilization. The site shows what Stone Age peoples could accomplish with organization, skill, and motivation, using stone tools and human labor over decades. Göbekli Tepe expands our understanding of prehistoric capabilities without overturning the basic timeline of human development. It shows that complex social organization and symbolic thinking emerged before agriculture, not that advanced technological civilizations existed and vanished. The distinction matters. Recognizing ancient peoples' actual achievements is more valuable than attributing them to imaginary precursor civilizations. The Antikythera mechanism shows that ancient Greeks possessed sophisticated astronomical knowledge and mechanical skills around 100 BCE. The device is remarkable, but built with Bronze Age technology gears cut by hand, astronomical knowledge from centuries of observations, and engineering principles developed through trial and error. It doesn't require anachronistic technology or lost civilizations to explain. The mechanism is important precisely because it demonstrates what ancient peoples achieved within their technological context. Similar reasoning applies to other impressive ancient constructions, the pyramids, Stonehenge, Machu Picchu, which are remarkable achievements using available technology and resources, not products of lost advanced civilizations or extraterrestrial assistance. The appeal of ancient advanced civilization theories is understandable. They offer mystery, challenge mainstream narratives, and suggest that history holds secrets yet to be discovered. The idea that sophisticated peoples existed long ago and vanished without a trace appeals to imagination and provides material for engaging stories. However, the appeal of a narrative doesn't make it true. Science requires evidence evaluated objectively using rigorous methods. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, not just anomalies that seem unusual, but clear, reproducible findings that can't be explained by known processes. Ancient advanced civilization claims consistently fail this test, relying on cherry-picked data, misinterpretations, and rejection of expert consensus. Earth's past does hold genuine mysteries that remain unresolved. The exact triggers for mass extinctions, the mechanisms driving snowball Earth events, the causes of rapid climate shifts, and many other questions await definitive answers. Studying these mysteries drives legitimate scientific research. Scientists explore Earth's history through fieldwork, laboratory analysis, and theoretical modeling, publishing findings in peer-reviewed journals where other experts can evaluate methods and conclusions. This process gradually resolves mysteries through accumulation of evidence. Alternative researchers who claim ancient advanced civilizations rarely participate in this process, instead presenting claims in popular books and media without subjecting them to scientific scrutiny. The possibility of detecting ancient civilizations through isotope anomalies, synthetic molecules, or unusual element concentrations remains an active research question in astrobiology and geology. As scientists refine methods for detecting industrial signatures, they improve ability to recognize such signatures both on Earth and potentially on other planets. If future surveys discover unexplained geochemical anomalies suggesting industrial activity in ancient rocks, the scientific community would investigate thoroughly, but such discoveries would need to withstand rigorous examination, be reproducible by independent researchers, and have no plausible natural explanations before being accepted as evidence of ancient civilizations. Current evidence indicates that Homo sapiens is Earth's first industrial civilization. This conclusion is provisional. Science remains open to new evidence, but is supported by massive amounts of positive evidence from multiple disciplines. The fossil record, geological record, and archaeological record all converge on the same story. Simple life evolved 3.5 billion years ago, complex life arose 600 million years ago, and intelligent technological life emerged only with humans in the last 300,000 years. This narrative is not accepted dogmatically, but because it's supported by overwhelming evidence. If new evidence emerged challenging this narrative, scientists would revise understanding accordingly. But such evidence must meet scientific standards, reproducible, independently verified, and resistant to alternative explanations. The search for ancient civilizations serves a useful purpose, even if none existed. It forces scientists to think about what signatures industrial civilizations leave, what evidence survives geological timescales, and how we would recognize such evidence if found. These questions are important for astrobiology. Understanding what biosignatures and technosignatures we should look for on exoplanets requires understanding what survives on Earth. The Silurian Hypothesis paper, while not claiming ancient civilizations existed, prompted serious scientific discussion about detectability of technological species in the geological record. This kind of thought experiment, when conducted rigorously, advances scientific understanding even if it confirms that no ancient civilizations existed. Earth's history remains incompletely understood, but the gaps in understanding don't provide space for lost advanced civilizations. The gaps are about details exactly how mass extinctions proceeded, precisely when certain evolutionary transitions occurred, what triggered specific climate shifts, not about whether entire technological civilizations existed and vanished. The rock record, while incomplete, is extensive enough that major civilizations existing for thousands or millions of years would leave detectable traces. The absence of those traces, combined with the presence of traces documenting actual evolutionary and geological history, leaves no reasonable room for pre-human industrial civilizations. We are, as far as all available evidence shows, the first of our kind on this planet, a realization that is both humbling and extraordinary.